Hey there, time travelers. Welcome back to another mind-bending episode of What If. Today, we're diving into the depths of imagination and pondering a question that'll leave you on the edge of your seat. What if Deku had matter manipulation? Yeah, you heard that right. We're about to unravel some seriously epic possibilities in the world of My Hero Academia. But hey, before we jump into the fray, smash that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you never miss out on our wild theories. Alright, buckle up, folks, 'cause this is gonna be one heck of a ride. Chapter 1. In this world, if you were powerless, if you were normal, then you were nothing. Everyone had something that made them special, stand out, be unique, and if you didn't, then you were overlooked or ignored. Izuku reached out with his hand and pulled as hard as he could, causing the All Might figure to lift and float right to his hand. He had perfect control once he lifted it, and strangely enough, he could feel so many things from the figurine. But he merely picked it up and brought it to his hand before holding it in the air for everyone to see. Today was his turn to show his classmates how his quirk worked, telekinetic control over small things. Izuku wasn't powerless, in fact he was tremendously powerful. He just didn't understand by how much yet. Wow! That was amazing, Midoriya! Cheered the teacher with a large smile. Everyone give Midoriya a round of applause, we have time for one more! Hands shot into the air and Izuku rushed back to his seat so he could see what the next quirk was. He loved seeing new quirks no matter what they were. Subtle or powerful, it didn't matter once he saw a quirk, he would just think of all the applications of it until he exhausted himself. A boy went up to the front to show his quirk, his red wings that he used to fly around the front of the room. Izuku picked up his pencil to write down his thoughts on the wing quirk when the same feeling he felt from the figurine came from the pencil in his hand. Izuku frowned, then focused and pulled. The pencil immediately cracked and broke apart, shattering across his desk, shocking the others around him. Hey Deku! What are you doing making a mess? Shouted the boy directly to his right. Izuku ducked his head and muttered an apology to the teacher and everyone in the room before taking out another pencil. He would have to look into that, maybe his mom would know. Broke your pencil? His mom repeated with a frown. Describe it to me again, please. I felt the pencil in my hand, and it felt like there were so many little tiny things inside of it, and it was like feeling something with my quirk, but there were so many. So, I pulled on a few of them and then the pencil just broke apart. Explained Izuku with wide eyes, clearly trying to show how surprising it was. Inko Midoriya was a young and attractive woman, standing a bit over 5 feet and having long green hair pulled into a ponytail. She was a well-educated woman and loved her son more than anything else in the world. As she looked down at him and his shocked little face, she got a feeling, nothing bad, just a strange feeling that nothing would be the same after today. They were scheduled to register his quirk, but that entailed a doctor's visit, and she knew they would be able to help him understand what he did with the pencil. I'm not sure, honey, but the doctor will be able to help, she said before smiling. I hope you've thought of a name. Izuku jumped with a wide grin. Of course. It'll be like yours. Laughing, she grabbed his hand and led him out to their car. The doctor hummed as he wrote down his findings. Quirks generally have 3 paths they can follow: combining, where both parents give their child a piece of their quirk; mutating, where something completely new occurs; and finally enhancing, where the child inherits a stronger version of one of the parents. You see any of these all the time, and I believe young Midoriya here has a stronger version of your quirk. Inko looked at Izuku in surprise. Just what is his quirk capable of? Well, that's the thing, we don't have some way of perfectly telling you. But from some tests we ran with young Midoriya here, we can confirm that he can perfectly control what he grabs with his quirk. No trembling, no shakiness, it goes where he tells it with no problems, unlike yours, which seems to be just attracting small things to you. Explained the doctor with a curious tilt to his head. Although he seemed to have a very low weight limit, merely 5 kilograms, which is one of the weakest I've seen of telekinetic quirks, even just starting out. Usually it is how much they can physically lift, or their weight, or something like that. Izuku drooped at hearing that. Does that mean I can't be a hero? The doctor looked at him with a raised eyebrow. Kid, there's no telling, you're still only 4 years old, so it would be pretty dumb to decide something like that right now. Quirks are like any other muscle, the more you use it the stronger it becomes. Perking up at that, Izuku smiled. So my quirk can control really small things that dash. The doctor quickly looked up at that. Really small? Of course. Both Midoriyas looked at the doctor with surprise as he shot up and ran out of the room. Is that good or bad, Mama? Asked Izuku with a tilt of his head. Inko chuckled nervously, Personally, she couldn't imagine a doctor running from a patient as a good thing. I'm sure it's fine. But she wouldn't worry her son. A moment later, the doctor came back with a glass of water. Oh, you were thirsty, nodded Izuku, getting a chuckle from the doctor. Not quite, he said before handing the glass to Izuku. Not to drink, it's for your test. Again, both Midoriyas looked at the doctor with confusion. I might have an idea on your quirk. I want you to tell me what all the little things feel like, and if there are different ones, anything you can tell me, explained the doctor while picking up his clipboard. Izuku nodded and put both hands on the glass. He could feel countless little things making up the glass, but when he reached the water he felt just as many, but there were two distinct things that made up the water. He kept feeling around, up until it got too confusing and he stopped. There are a lot of really small things that make the glass, but it's like they are stuck together. I'm sure I could move them apart. There are two different things that make the water, but if I really focus there are even more, even smaller things, Izuku said with a frown, still not understanding what everything meant. The water, try and pull one of them away, the doctor urged with a glint in his eye. Doing so, Izuku felt the same thing he always did with his quirk. Once he grabbed it, it was his to control. One of the two things making up the water was pulled, and the water slowly began to vaporize from the cup, not even leaving a dampness in the glass. Izuku looked surprised, Inko looked shocked, and the doctor had a massive grin on his face. Last test, this will be hard, put them back. Izuku frowned and reached, but it was hard to find the two things he just separated, but he found a very small amount of them, and pushed them together. After almost a minute of focus, he made 3 small water drops at the bottom of the glass, to which the doctor shot forward and took the glass. Marvelous! Astounding! Truly, my boy, you are a marvel! Do you have any idea what you are capable of? The doctor's surprised and ecstatic shouting echoed off the walls of the small room, making the Midoriyas wince. I played with the water? Asked Izuku with furrowed brows. The doctor roared with laughter. Yes. Yes, you did. But not how you're thinking. My boy, you manipulated the molecules, the very building blocks of the water. You told me how you did something similar to the pencil, and that seals it. The reason your weight limit is so low is because that isn't the focus of your quirk. Inko frowned. I don't understand, so he can unmake and then remake things? No. It's even more than that. If that were the case, then he would have remade the same amount of water as he unmade. My boy, I think you will be capable of manipulating matter itself. All things that make up this universe are incredibly small, and you, Izuku Midoriya, can perfectly control anything that weighs less than 5 kilograms, anything. I bet with practice and study you could manipulate atoms. The doctor took on a frantic look. You could do anything, my boy. You asked if you could be a hero? I think you could do whatever you well please with a quirk like yours. Anything. Most of the doctor's words were flying over Izuku's head. He didn't really know what a lot of what he was talking about meant. But he understood that the doctor was telling him that he could be a hero. That made him grin, and he almost shouted with joy. But his mom was looking at him with wide eyes while nervously looking at the doctor every couple of seconds before she stood up from her chair. Thank you, doctor, but my son and I will be leaving now. Thank you for everything you've done today. Inko forced Izuku up and to bow with her before leaving the room, trying to ignore the laughing doctor behind them. Honey, your quirk's name is manipulation of small things, okay? Understand? She asked him seriously, and Izuku nodded with a frown. I need you to keep what happened with the doctor to yourself. It's better if we don't talk about it for now, okay? Izuku frowned deeper but nodded slowly. Am I in trouble? Inko stopped and kneeled down next to him. Baby, your quirk is powerful, and there are people who will want to use it, so we have to make sure that they don't know about it too soon or you won't be ready. Oh, muttered Izuku. If I get better with my quirk, can I tell people and be a hero? Inko sighed. Her son really had a one-track mind. If you master that quirk, you can do anything you want, and yes, you most certainly can be a hero. But for now, don't talk about it too much or tell people everything, okay? Okay, shouted Izuku with a wide grin. The rest of the day was his mother nervously filling out papers and naming his quirk in the registry, then his celebratory dinner. He talked to his dad over the phone, then went to play in his room. His mother was in a quiet conversation with his dad, but he didn't care because he had a quirk and he could be a hero. Like All Might. He always thought back to that day as the years passed. It has been over 10 years and he never forgot his mother's worried face or the doctor's crazed laugh. It was funny to think about. Back when his quirk first manifested, he truly didn't understand how powerful it was. In fact, he used to be upset that he couldn't lift more than 5 kilograms. But at the behest of his mother he studied sciences, specifically atomic sciences, and while it took him years to really understand what he was reading, when he did, he understood just what he was blessed with. His quirk had two ironclad rules. He could only lift things that weighed exactly 5 kilograms or less, even a milligram over, and it was impossible to move. His range of control started at just 5 meters. With training he's increased to 11 meters. However, the further out the less fine of control he has. Other than those two rules he hasn't found a single limitation, and he has done some wild things. He created gold from minerals, granted it was a small amount as he can't influence matter to that level yet, but it was a 24-carat square of gleaming gold. He has created a diamond from coal. He can turn the air around him into water, then freeze it into ice, and with a flick of his finger vaporize the ice into nothing. But the most insane things he's manipulated was himself. Izuku clenched his fist with a subtle grin. To be a hero you needed to be strong in some way. His quirk was one of the most powerful in the world, but it was also very subtle. So, he needed something that was good for physical combat. After all, he was just a normal person and couldn't win a fist fight with people with combative quirks. He started with his bones. With study and careful preparation, and a full 26 hours of focus, he turned his bones into something else. They were far more durable but even more streamlined. He took inspiration from carbon fiber and titanium, compacting the building blocks of his bones so tight it would take something incredible to even crack a small one. From there he went to his muscles. Denser, each and every fiber being better than the absolute peak of a normal person. He could lift tons. His thoughts moved throughout his body. While he only finished his muscle manipulation and enhancements last week, he was looking at what else he wanted to change. He has been studying the human body extensively, and he was looking at his senses. See further, process faster, hear even better, and so on. If he could do that, then he would be set. He had a powerful and adaptive quirk, and his body wouldn't be vulnerable like most emitter types. But perhaps the most incredible thing he's accomplished with his quirk is how he's able to heal. Any injury to himself he can stitch back together instantly. He could heal well enough to remove scars and recreate blood and tissue, so as long as he could focus, he could heal. His mother was right all those years ago. His quirk was powerful, and he could see how people would want to use his gift for themselves. "Settle down!" His teacher shouted over the rowdy class, bringing him from his thoughts. "I know that all of you are excited, but we need to talk about potential high schools." Who am I kidding? You all want to go to the hero programs." The class roared at that, and Izuku chuckled to himself. He found the energy infectious and couldn't help grinning. But before anyone could really say anything, an explosion sounded off. "Now don't you go lumping me in with all these extras!" shouted an arrogant voice to Izuku's right. "I've got top scores, the best quirk to come out of this shithole of a school, and I'm destined for UA." The voice belonged to Katsuki Bakugo, his former friend turned class asshole. Many of the class booed his words for calling them extras, while Izuku just rolled his eyes. Bakugo was too arrogant for his liking. He was a promising hero candidate, but he didn't have any real chance of being number one. No one would ever like him that much. The teacher nodded lazily. And it would seem like Midoriya also applied for UA." Izuku nodded. "I aced all the mock tests too, and I'm very confident that I will pass," he said with a smile. Most of the class didn't know what to say to that. Many of them knew he had a telekinetic quirk, but not the extent of it. Many have never even seen him use it, but they knew he was smart, so if he was confident, then all they could really do was shrug. Except for one student. "What?" roared Bakugo, jumping from his desk. "Deku, you think you can just apply to UA? Trash like you should just stay out of my way. You hear me? I'm the only one who'll get into UA." He got up to rush his desk, but Izuku just ignored him. The teacher was quick to get the room under control. "Bakugo, get back into your seat. No quirk usage at school, you know that." Reluctantly, Bakugo sat back down but was glaring at him pretty hard. Izuku just ignored him as best he could while writing into his hero notebook. Class ended after a while, and right as Izuku was about to walk out of class, he was grabbed by the shoulder. Looking over, it was by his long-fingered classmate whose name he couldn't remember. The fat flying one was next to him while Bakugo stepped in front of him. Rolling his eyes, he looked at Bakugo while slapping the hand off his shoulder. "What do you want, Bakugo?" "I have to get home," he asked with a frown. Bakugo actually snarled at that. "I'm warning you now, don't apply to UA. I don't want my greatness pulled down by your pathetic existence." He raised a hand and set off a few firecracker pops for intimidation. Izuku looked at the hand before tilting his head and raising his own hand. Focusing intently, he molded the building blocks of the universe, creating what he needed, changing and creating a substance for this singular purpose. Barely 15 seconds passed before similar pops and cracks exploded off of his palm, mirroring Bakugo. Did I do it right? Izuku asked with a raised eyebrow. Nitroglycerin, right? I think I did it right. If that's all, I'm going to go. The look of shock on Bakugo's face was enough that Izuku could brush past him with no trouble and leave the classroom. If he were honest, that was one of the most liberating things he's ever done. Only 3 people besides himself really knew what his quirk was, and he's been extra careful not to show it off. Now that he was older and stronger thanks to his self-enhancements, he wasn't scared to flex a bit. Not to mention pushing back against Bakugo was a nice feeling. The boy was just too arrogant for his liking, too different from the Kaken that used to be his friend. On his way home, he thought about his plans for Yue. The test was in a bit under 10 months, and he needed to be ready for anything. Maybe instead of neural enhancements, he should focus on defenses and functional processes like organ efficiencies. It would be delicate, but it was doable. Walking under the underpass, Izuku didn't notice the sewer grate open behind him as a green sludge poured from it. A massive amount of green sludge surged forward and enveloped Izuku, trying to sink its body into him. A nice invisibility cloak. Stop squirming, it'll go faster. The sludge growled as it tried to take him over. Izuku glared at the sludge before reaching out with his power, and the molecular forces bent to his will. Before the sludge knew what was happening, his body was frozen in place, allowing Izuku to brute force his way out with a flex. Izuku grinned down at his body. If that wasn't proof enough of his strength, then he didn't know what was. Oh yeah, I can be a hero, he muttered to himself with a grin as he clenched his fist. I'll say. A voice boomed from behind him. You made that look easy, young man. That one even gave me a bit of trouble, the booming voice said with a laugh. Izuku spun around with a look of shock and awe. His idol was standing in front of him. All Might! I never thought! What are you? What? Izuku's brain shorted out as he stared at the grinning face that he's looked up to since he was capable of thought. Aha! Young man, I have to say that was some impressive work. You didn't panic and saved yourself. Why, if more citizens were like you, then we heroes would be out of a job, praised All Might with his signature grin. Getting himself under control, Izuku took a deep breath. Thank you, All Might. I didn't know what was happening. He just tried to take control of my body and I broke free because I didn't want him to. He finished lamely. He knew that he would potentially be in trouble for using his quirk on someone. Self-defense, or not, the laws were kind of ridiculous when quirks were involved. He calmed when All Might just nodded in response. All Might looked over at the villain with a hum. Well, I have to say I don't know how to bring him in when he's a block of ice. I don't want to kill him, and he doesn't look too solid. Izuku perked up at that. I can undo it or harden it if you'd like. All Might looked back with surprise before smiling wider. Undo it so I may apprehend this villain. Izuku backed up a few steps and raised his arm in the direction of the villain. Focus and control. The frozen sludge cracked, and then a second later the ice was gone, and the viscous villain was back to normal, and it was looking around clearly dazed from the process. For most of his life Izuku had thought he was powerful. His quirk could and likely was in the top 1%. But he couldn't even finish blinking before All Might had the villain secured. The sheer speed and control the man possessed was incredible. It was certainly humbling to watch, not that he could even see it. How? Muttered Izuku, but it was drowned out by All Might's booming laughter. Impressive work, young man. But with that I need to dash. Before he could finish that thought, a cloud of steam exploded out, and All Might's form was revealed to be a skeletal man with sunken features with blood pouring from his mouth. Go, shit. Izuku just looked at him with wide eyes and complete shock. All Might? Damn, I was afraid of this. I was in that sewer longer than I thought. Hey kid, you okay? The skinny All Might asked. What happened to you? Is this your quirk? Can you transform? Izuku muttered. He and the rest of the world could never figure out the man's quirk. It could have been invulnerability or super strength. No one knew for sure. The skinny All Might groaned. Not quite, look, he said while lifting his shirt to show a truly terrible scar. With my injury I can't maintain myself for longer than a few hours a day. What I do is suck in some air and puff out my chest. That makes no sense, thought Izuku with incredulity. Looking at the injury, he knew that he couldn't completely heal it. That would be practically impossible at his current level, but he could maybe ease his pain. Izuku stepped forward and pointed his hand at the injury. while All Might dropped his shirt back down and looked at him with a frown. Reaching out, Izuku sensed the true level of damage done to his idol. I could help, Izuku muttered as he continued to sense. Really bad stuff, lungs, stomach, both need extensive work. That's right, All Might said with surprise. How do you know that? Izuku snapped out of it and looked up in surprise. I said that out loud? All Might nodded. You did, now how do you know that? I assumed you had an ice or freezing quirk? The unasked question was obvious. Izuku looked around nervously. He really didn't know what to do, but he had two thoughts. First, he knew that he was old enough to tell people what he could do within reason. Second was that All Might was one person he was sure was a 100% good person. So, with that in mind, my quirk is telekinesis, of anything that weighs less than 5 kilograms, said Izuku with a look. It took a moment before Izuku's actions and his description clicked in the hero's head. Wow, kid, I don't know what to tell you, but that is one special quirk. Izuku nodded. I don't really tell people what I can do because of the attention I'd get. But I think I can help you. That injury looks really bad and I know a thing or two about the human body. To emphasize his point, Izuku lashed out with a kick to the side of the underpass, making a large spidering crack in the concrete. All Might looked at the wall with surprise as he connected the dots. You enhance yourself? He asked with incredulity. Izuku nodded. I want to be the best hero possible, so I'm doing everything I can to accomplish that. He was actually quite proud of his work, only his mother knew what he's done. So, it was nice to show off for once. All Might had just become even more surprised hearing that. Kid, that sounds like it was a delicate process that you could have easily messed up on. Tell me someone knows you've done this to yourself? My mom, and I plan on doing more. But anyway, I can help you if you'd let me, Izuku said with a large smile on his face. Just the thought of helping his idol would make his year. No. His whole life. All Might shook his head. I think I'm going to have to pass on that for now, young man. But I'd like to know your name. Izuku blushed at having realized that he never introduced himself to his idol. Oh. I'm sorry. My name is Izuku Midoriya and I will be a hero. I plan to go to UA. I have a feeling you will, All Might said with a grin. Good luck and work hard, I'm sure you'll make a fine hero one day. The two parted ways on a good note, All Might taking in the villain and Izuku having a story for his grandchildren. As he walked home, he froze in shock. Nearly 10 minutes he was talking with All Might, the number one, his hero, his idol, his inspiration, and he never got an autograph. No! Wailed Izuku. Chapter 2. It took a surprisingly long time for him to get over his mistake enough to get home. To think he could stand so close to All Might and not get an autograph. He was ashamed to all fans. He was too ashamed to go onto the forums and debate with Fars 1 GHT 420 about obscure All Might trivia. After dinner, Inko had enough and walked up to him with a frown. Okay, young man, what has gotten into you? You've been moping all afternoon, she asked with worry. She was a gentle woman, and as her son grew up, she only got more worried about his impending life as a hero. She was glad he had such a strong quirk, at least she knew that he would be well equipped. But that didn't save her from her chronic worrying. Izuku groaned. I met All Might, Mom, I met him, he was so close I could slap him. And tears welled in his eyes as he stared up at him. Mother. I forgot to get an autograph, he wailed. What? Inko muttered in confusion, then rolled her eyes. Of course, that's the problem. How did you meet All Might? She asked after realizing what he said. Izuku calmed down and took a breath. I was attacked by a villain and he showed up after I stopped it. Actually, maybe he shouldn't have. What? Shouted Inko before practically teleporting to him to look him over. Are you okay? Did the villain hurt you? Did it touch you? Izuku flinched back with a grimace. What? No. What are you talking about? I was attacked by a slime villain, like he was made of slime, so I froze it. Then All Might showed up saying he'd been chasing it for a while. His mom really needed to calm down, honestly. Inko sunk into the couch. Thank goodness, you know how dangerous it is out there. What if someone grabbed you and tried to do something to you? I think I'm gonna be alright, Mom. I've become pretty strong, you know, he said while sending a look to his mom. Hearing that, his mom sighed. I know, but I just can't stop worrying. You know how I am. Both of them calmed down enough that Inko looked back at her son. I'm sure that you'll get another chance for an autograph dash. Whoa! I can't believe I let my chance go. wailed Izuku in anguish, making his mother sigh. With his disastrous, shameful, no! He was over it. With that day behind him. Better. With that day behind him, it was time to refocus on his ambition. Getting into UA. He had a little under 10 months to prepare himself, and he had decided on something that he overlooked in his years growing up. Fighting experience. While he didn't plan on becoming a street brawler type, he couldn't overlook the fact that he had strength greater than some minor strength-enhancing quirks, and he needed to learn to control it. After school, he was going to look into a dojo, or training club, or whatever was out there that could help him. In the meantime, he had class to deal with. With class came Bakugo, and with Bakugo came. Izuku flinched back as a loud explosion came from right behind him. He didn't feel anything, but it was very loud. Turning around, he glared at Bakugo. "What do you want? Can I go to class in peace?" he said with a frown. Honestly, the guy was obsessed with him. "Deku," he growled. "What the hell was that yesterday? You think I didn't notice what you did? You copied me, my quirk. You lied about your quirk, didn't you? You think you can look down on Dash?" "I'm going to stop you right there," interrupted Izuku, getting actual steam to come out of Bakugo's ears in his anger. "You have to realize that I don't have to tell you anything, right? You're not my family or friend. You know that, right? It's very important to me that you realize I don't owe you anything." Izuku didn't bother correcting him about his quirk. Honestly, let him think what he wants. But really, did Bakugo think he was supposed to tell him every little thing about his life and ask permission about things? He was delusional if he did. "Did you just interrupt me, Deku?" growled Bakugo while reaching forward with crackling palms. "It's time you understand your place, you useless piece of trash. I'm the only one who'll dash." Izuku slapped away the hand and pushed past him. "I don't have time for this." The bell for class rang and Bakugo realized that he needed to get to class himself, and put down his hands with muttered threats under his breath. Sitting at his desk, Izuku hummed to himself while looking through his notebook, specifically the one about his quirk. So far, he was capable of many things, but time was the issue. New things took longer to do, so he started practicing changing different things or creating things so that he could do them quickly. So far, water was what he was fasted with. He could create it out of nothing, freeze it, unfreeze it, and so on. It was his go-to, and it saved him against the slime villain. He planned on practicing the process of weakening and strengthening objects, or even people. If he wanted to get inside of somewhere, he could manipulate the walls to allow him in, or to defend, he could strengthen things. If he came across someone with an armor quirk, he'd need to find a way to fight it, and weakening the bonds was the best he could think of other than just pounding away with his strength. Next, he was going to work on creating objects, which was going to be very difficult. To create something from essentially nothing, it meant that he needed to manipulate atoms to create it from quite literally the ground up. Possible, but just so very difficult. So far, he can create water, but there was enough in the air that it wasn't too hard. He's also made sand and wood from nothing, but both took a lot of focus. Shaping would be easy, but the materials were what was going to take practice, and that was one of the things he was gonna have to work on. He'll just have to go through the periodic table until he got them all down. From there, everything should be easy. In theory, at least, hopefully. His goal would be a sword and shield. If he can make one from nothing for the exam, then he'll consider his level 1 creation training complete. Last was just plain old combat, punches and kicks, grabs, and so on. Yeah, he needed help. Actually, there was a girl in his class that was a martial artist, so he'd ask her after school. With that thought, school started and his teacher began talking. The day went like all the others, monotonous and unnecessary. Rushing after the crowd of his classmates, he found who he was looking for, Ameshi Akemi. She was a well-built girl, visible muscles and short black hair gave off the impression of tough tomboy. "Ameshi!" Izuku called, making the girl in question look at him curiously. "I had a few questions I wanted to ask you." "Well, what is it, Midoriya?" she asked with an impatient frown. Izuku pushed down the annoyance at her tone but worked through it. "I wanted to look into physical training, specifically martial arts. I know you practice them, so I was wondering if there are any places you recommend?" Ameshi perked up at that. "Wanting to get some fighting experience, Midoriya?" she said with a smirk. "Why don't you come down to the fight dojo? They teach a bit of everything there, but the goal is in the name, you learn to fight." "That sounds perfect. Is that where you go?" "Yeah," nodded Ameshi. "I go to a few places, but fight dojo is the best when I just want to wail on people." Her smirk took a more viscous turn and Izuku felt he understood why people were a bit intimidated by her. Ameshi gave him the information on the dojo and Izuku sent the information to his mother and told her he would be home late. Fight Dojo was a large 6-story building with the first and second floor having a top-of-the-line gym, while the upper floors weren't visible from the ground level. If he were to be honest, he was kind of intimidated by the look of it. While he was pretty confident that he could win because of his enhancements, he was sure that he was below novice level. Walking in, he was met with the second largest man he's ever met, who giving the front desk worker some papers. He was well over 6 feet tall and every muscle on his body was well defined. He was wearing a GI with a black belt and his head was bald. "How can I help you, young man?" he asked, and his low baritone voice was as deep as Izuku was expecting. "I was hoping to apply to the martial arts program or whatever it's called here. I heard you don't teach just one thing," Izuku said with some uncertainty. The man nodded with a grin. "I see. Well, you've come to the right place. I teach my students how to fight, be it with their quirk or with a martial art. Tell me why you wish to fight." Izuku firmed himself up. "I'm going to be a hero and I know that the job is dangerous, and I will need to know how to fight. I have more than enough strength, I need control." The man perked up when he mentioned strength. "You have enough, you say, you have a good build, but nothing is perfect. Tell me your name." Izuku blushed at forgetting to introduce himself yet again. "Izuku Midoriya, sir. And I didn't mean to sound cocky, but with my quirk my body has plenty of strength. I just want to know how to control it because it's so new to me." "I see," the man hummed. "My name is Ryujin, and this is my dojo. If you wish to join, then follow me." Ryujin didn't leave time to say anything and Izuku rushed to follow him towards the central stairs. They walked up to the second level where a lot of machines were being used by people working out as they continued up to the third level. This was a more open floor with lots of mats and people with GIs sparring with each other. "This is the beginner floor. I will pair you up with someone to test you," said Ryujin while gesturing to another boy. "You don't have a GI, but remove your shoes and whatever you feel is too restricting." Izuku threw off his red shoes and took off the outer part of his school uniform, leaving a white undershirt. He'll leave the pants since he didn't want to fight in his underwear. Honestly, he could easily change his clothes, but he wasn't too keen on drawing attention to himself just yet. Stepping into the center mat, Izuku limbered up, trying to mimic some of the others who were doing stretches. Good thing about his enhanced bones and muscles was that they were always primed and ready no matter what, but everyone else didn't know that. Ryujin stepped in front of him. "You will be sparring with another hero applicant. He is new to this place like you. Kaminari Denki, come forward." From the crowd of people, a blond boy walked forward. He didn't look cocky, but he was confident. He had a black streak in his hair shaped like a lightning bolt, and his GI had a white belt showing his novice level. "Now I want both of you to do your best to knock the other off the mat or force them to submit. I will authorize the use of quirks, but don't make me stop this because you went crazy." At that he sent a look at Kaminari, who scratched the back of his head. Ryujin looked over at Izuku. "You said you were strong?" At Izuku's nod he went to stand off the mat. "Kaminari, you're against a strength enhancer. Midoriya, you're up against lightning generation. Begin!" Kaminari, being the more confident of the two, rushed toward Izuku to begin the fight. Izuku watched him approach, confident in his abilities. Kaminari did a solid straight right punch that Izuku caught and sent a weak punch in response. However, Izuku truly didn't realize the level he was on physically, as a weak punch still flew fast enough and with enough force to knock Kaminari off his feet with a grunt. Izuku winced and looked at his fist. He didn't put too much into that, but it was still too much. He really needed to lean to control his strength. Kaminari shot back to his feet with yellow lightning sparking off his body. "You're pretty strong, but I won't hold back anymore." Izuku braced himself for a shocking hand-to-hand fight, but instead a wave of yellow lightning exploded out from Kaminari, with him being the epicenter. Izuku frowned at the clear lack of control. The lightning hit his body, but his increased hardiness allowed him to shrug it off without much issue. Izuku decided to go on to the offense and rushed forward. Kaminari grimaced and took a rudimentary stance with yellow lightning crackling off of his body. Izuku swerved and sent a kick to Kaminari's midsection that was dodged, but Izuku's body was beyond human, his balance and flexibility more than normal. Quickly adapting to the missed kick, he twirled into a punch that sunk into Kaminari's stomach, knocking him off of the mat, ending the match. "That was actually easy. I didn't even need to use my quirk. I could have countered the lighting by using air molecules, but I wasn't even that affected by his quirk," mused Izuku while marveling at his body's abilities. The sound of clapping brought Izuku from his thoughts as he looked over at a grinning Ryujin. That was impressive, Midoriya. I can tell you pulled your punches. Just how strong are you? He asked. Izuku looked down and thought. He really didn't know. He knew that he could lift a car, but that was about it. Not sure, couple tons, I think. Really, between his bones and muscles, his strength was beyond most of humanity. Only strong enhancer types could beat him in terms of force. We'll have to work on your technique, cause from what I saw it was non-existent. You don't use your body right in your strikes and there's a lot of wasted movement. But we'll get it right, he said with a nod before turning toward Kaminari. I will say it again, you need to find another way to use that quirk, it has no control. Other than that, I could see real improvement in your form, it just didn't help against someone so much stronger. Kaminari ducked his head. Yeah, but my quirk is like impossible to control once I bring it out, no matter what I try, he said with a sigh. Izuku on the other hand tilted his head in thought. But you held it in your hand? He said, getting both Kaminari and Ryujin to look at him. I mean, from what I know about emitters is they are usually one of two types, outer or inner manipulation. During the fight I thought you were going to coat your hand in lightning, but instead you shot it out. Maybe try controlling it internally? Kaminari pursed his lips. Really? Are you dash? Genius! Shouted Ryujin with a massive grin. He quickly turned to Kaminari. Your fighting has always been focused on flashiness and high damage. You produce internally and then expel, but there was no control once it left your body. So obviously all the control was internal. We need to make it so you surround yourself with your lightning. It would be like getting into a fist fight with a taser. Wow! Exclaimed Kaminari. I've never thought of that. I always wanted to make like a lightning sword or something. Ryujin snorted. You usually just blast out as much lightning as possible and hope for the best. Kaminari grumbled to himself at that. Thanks for the tip, dude, I appreciate it, he said to Izuku before walking off while staring at his hand. Ryujin shook his head before turning to Izuku. From what I saw, you need the fundamentals, like throwing punches and kicks, blocks and parries and so on. Izuku nodded. Yeah, I don't have any experience fighting. Well, that will change pretty quick here, he said with a grin. You're required to fight at least once a week to keep your membership. But most fight every day. His grin turned feral at the end. Izuku replicated the grin as best he could, although he felt a bit more nervous than excited. He had a feeling that his strength wouldn't matter in the coming weeks. Moaned Izuku as he put ice on his head. He was right when he felt nervous about fighting at the dojo. Master Ryujin didn't hesitate to throw him against more experienced fighters. In terms of fighting, Izuku was in a catch-22 situation, seeing as how he was too strong for someone at his level but not good enough to fight people who could fight through his strength. So Ryujin just expected him to get good enough to fight the more experienced fighters, while fighting them. Even if he was thrown to the ground every 5 seconds. Even if his poor head was throbbing for the whole training session. Oh well, he'd overcome this like he will everything else. It was hard for now, but he was training and getting better with every fight. Even if it wasn't too noticeable. For now, it was time to focus on his next big portion of training. Learning to create from nothing. His quirk was capable of damn near anything, but the problem was that he was in complete control. Quirks that can make things usually went off the imagination of the user, meaning that all the tiny little details were skipped over, but with that came limitations. Like Pixie Bob of the wild pussycats who could manipulate Earth to an impressive degree over a huge range. But she could only manipulate Earth and couldn't produce it. Not his quirk. Matter manipulation was incredibly precise and left everything to the user, i.e. him. With that meant that he could do anything, but it also meant that every little detail was up to him, which meant things took a lot of knowledge and focus. With time he would get better at doing things, but at the moment if he wanted to do something intricate, he had to be careful, or it flat out wouldn't work. So, with that he was going to memorize all the elements of the periodic table. If he could make them seamlessly, then he had a large part of the building process out of the way. But even one element would take a while to master. Lots of upfront work, but the payoff would be incredible. So, with that in mind, he needed to study the makeup of every element, then go from there. Hydrogen and oxygen were already well under his control, so he had 2 down. First, he would learn iron, then titanium, silver, gold, then finally tungsten. He could only produce 5 kilograms worth of material at once, but he could manipulate anything once it was created. Also, he didn't plan on making a massive sword and shield anyway. But they would be damn near indestructible, maybe some armor plating that he could form around himself at a moment's notice. Although, seeing Kaminari use his quirk made him realize that he was within the realm of creating elemental reactions. He could easily see himself making a bolt of lightning, a stream of fire, or a pressurized air cannon. Again, it would be delicate and would take a lot of practice, but it was doable. So, with that, Izuku sat on the floor of his room and researched the first metal element he wanted to make. The atomic makeup of iron consisted of 26 protons and 30 neutrons, which would be bound by 26 electrons. Writing it out, then drawing it on paper, gave him a better picture of what he was doing. After about an hour of study and drawing, he was ready to try. He could feel the building blocks of the universe answer his call, moving thousands upon thousands of micro-sized objects. He made many errors, being fractions of a fraction of a fraction of a millimeter off, causing one of them to fail, causing him to fix the surrounding atoms, but it wasn't too strenuous. With every completed atom, he got a tiny bit faster and a tiny bit more precise. 15 minutes. It took 15 minutes, but after all that time, he made a milligram of pure iron. As he made it himself from literally nothing, it had no impurities. It was a tiny perfect sphere, and it rested in the palm of his hand. He did it. He created it from nothing. He may have just realized how incredible of a quirk he had. Altering himself, that was awesome, but it took years of study and prep just to make himself as strong as an enhancer, and granted he could heal, but so could so many. But this, he made something from nothing, just focus. He could do anything. Wow. I need to lay down, thought Izuku. Iron was possible, which meant every element was possible, which meant anything was possible. Now he could understand the crazed laughter of the doctor and his mother's worry. But on the other hand, he couldn't hold back a grin. A massive grin that took over his face, a grin that just realized his full potential. He wasn't going to ever stop improving, he would keep going until he hit a wall, and that wall was already known to him, the 5 kilograms limit. That was the only thing stopping him from shaping the world how he wished. Changing the land to fit him or altering the very earth to fit his desires. He could only go 5 kilograms at a time, which meant that he would have to stick to gases and plasma for large-scale effects. Gas, maybe I could try to recreate Midnight's gas to knock people unconscious. Thoughts for later, mused Izuku. Okay, it was time to work through how that went. He already had a few thoughts. First, the amount of focus it took for 1 milligram of iron was more than he expected, which meant he needed practice and a lot of it. Second, the strain on his head to focus that intently was enough that he was kind of tired. Though this could be mitigated by neural enhancements through biological manipulation or stamina training. Third, holding his creation in his hand made him realize that it was far easier to mold than something he just picked up off the ground. The small sphere of iron changed to a small cube, then a pyramid, without much effort on his end. Fourth, and the most insane of his observations. The creation of matter did not require any input. Meaning he didn't need to give fuel or payment to create, he just did it. He would have to keep this to himself. Rare and valuable resources like rhodium, palladium, iridium, and gold could be created in a matter of minutes, to which he could then sell. Each of them going for nearly 5 million yen per kilogram, meaning he could make 25 million yen per batch without having to give anything in exchange. Again, he'd keep this part to himself. Making notes of his discoveries in his personal notebook, he laid down on his bed, being careful to keep the ice pack in place. It was 7 months into his training and 3 months away from the UA entrance exam that something insane happened. Izuku was sitting at the dinner table after a hard day of studying, while adding to the perfect sphere of gold floating above his palm. He had already worked through most of the elements that he wanted to be able to create before the exam. These last few weeks he was working on the speed at which he made them. At the moment he could create a kilogram of matter in 9 minutes, and it was a difficult 9 minutes. Not fast enough to be feasible yet, but he was getting there. He could see his goal in the distance. The average sword weights between 1.5 and 3 kilograms depending on the size and make. A shield weighed a bit more, but it was still well under his limit of single-unit creation. A couple of loud knocks on the door echoed through the apartment, and he heard his mother rush to answer the door. He could hear voices but didn't pay attention to them as he focused on the floating orb of gold. "Wow, you weren't kidding, Tashinori," a grizzled voice said as he and a very familiar gaunt blonde entered the dining room, followed nervously by his mother. This older man was curiously short. He wore a simple shirt and slacks, had a gray beard, and used a cane to walk. The second was All Might in his small gaunt form, wearing a dress shirt and loose cargo pants. Both men and his mother had their eyes on the gleaming orb of gold, causing him to realize what he was doing and who was in front of him. He set the gold on the table and calmly, tore through his apartment towards his room. He faintly heard sounds of confusion and his mother's nervous assurances as he grabbed his notebook and rushed back. "Autograph!" he wailed as he pushed his notebook into the face of his hero, much to the shock of his mother and exasperation of the small elderly man. All Might nervously stared at the notebook before signing it. Izuku snatched it back and stared at the signature with watery eyes before repeating his earlier frantic movements to put the notebook back. A minute later his two guests were staring at him with bizarre looks on their faces. His mother left to continue cooking and he was calmly sipping his drink pretending that his earlier actions never happened. All Might cleared his throat and calmed down. "Well, we can just move past that," he said, getting a snort from the old man. "Oh, this is Gran Torino, he taught me back in UA. I came to speak to you about what you said when we met. About the possibility of healing." Izuku nodded. "Yes, I'm not sure if I can completely heal you yet. I don't have experience creating organs, but I can certainly repair anything." Gran Torino interrupted there. "Well, Toshinori here didn't tell me your quirk, just that he's been obsessing over the possibility that you might be able to heal him. But from what I just saw it looks like some sort of telekinesis." Izuku could tell he was asking for an explanation. Also, Izuku felt gratitude toward All Might that he didn't share anything about his quirk with someone he was clearly close to. "My quirk can do many things, and rather than give you the runaround I'll just say it. My quirk is matter manipulation, so I'm not held down by the limitations of a healing quirk. But I'm curious," continued Izuku. "Why did you turn away my offer back then? Also, why is Gran Torino here? Not that I mind it, more curiosity than anything." "Well," started All Might with a cough. "I wasn't about to trust someone with a potentially dangerous procedure minutes after meeting them." Izuku had the decency to blush at that. "Also, Gran Torino is here because frankly he decided to follow me after I told him what I was planning on doing, and he kinda does whatever he wants." The last part was said with a nervous grimace. But All Might continued before Gran Torino could say anything. "But I haven't been able to not think about it. For all this time I've been wondering if what you said was true. I looked into you, model student, and you have clear aspirations of being a hero. So, I didn't think it'd be too much trouble to speak to you again. Also, I was a bit worried about you too, young Midoriya." Izuku looked at him in surprise. "Why? I don't go looking for villains, that was just happenstance." No, said All Might with a wave. "I meant what you said you did to yourself. I was going to ask if you've had a professional look you over?" "Well, I'm sure started Izuku, but..." "He hasn't!" shouted his mother from the kitchen. Izuku blushed and looked away from the two men. "Yes, she's been trying to get me to a doctor to make sure that I'm all working, but I'm sure I'm fine." He shouted the last part toward the kitchen. "Also, I don't like to show off my quirk if I can help it. Especially what I'm capable of." "What did he do?" asked Gran Torino. "Is it crazier than creating what I can only guess is an enormous ball of pure gold?" he asked with incredulity. "Well, that depends," started Izuku. "I altered my body, enhancing my bones and muscles by manipulating densities and atomic bonds. It was difficult, but worth it." "Oh, so you're as crazy as Toshinori." "Got it," nodded Torino with a snort. "But I will say if he can do that, then I wouldn't doubt his abilities. Also, he doesn't look threatening, so I got what I wanted from this meeting." Izuku looked at him with a frown and raised eyebrow while All Might coughed into his hand. "Well," started All Might with a cough. "I was going to offer to bring you to a doctor I trust implicitly with all my medical information. She is discreet and won't spread information about your quirk. I was also hoping you could work with her to heal me," he said before quickly adding, "as best you can, of course." Izuku nodded, and he could practically feel his mother telepathically telling him that he needed to see this doctor for a physical anyway. "Okay, I'll go along with that. Who is it?" All Might's grin spread through his whole gaunt face, and Izuku could feel the gratitude from the man. If he were honest, it hurt to see his hero in this state, so that was just fuel to his desire to help him. "Excellent!" All Might exclaimed. "If you're free, we can go tomorrow. Also, the doctor in question is actually a hero, recovery girl. She's been my personal doctor for quite a few years now." "Tomorrow is fine," Izuku said with a smile. "But while you're here, can I give you a scan? Feel like I should ask, even though you don't have to really do anything other than sit there." Gran Torino looked interested while All Might gave him the go-ahead. Mentally reaching out, Izuku felt through All Might's body for all injuries and ailments. First, he noticed that his stomach was practically non-existent. He'd need to completely build him a new one, which would not be easy. especially considering he's never created an organ from scratch, but he'd give it his best shot. Next thing he noticed was his respiratory system. Lots of stress injuries. One lung just flat out didn't work and had enough holes in it to call it a net. Good news on that though was that there was enough existing tissue that he'd just need to fix it rather than create a new one. His throat didn't look too good and his diaphragm also needed just a whole lot of work to fix. Actually, the only thing that wasn't broken was his nasal cavity. All Might, muttered Izuku with a frown. I gotta ask, what happened? You really shouldn't be alive and much less still operating as a hero with these injuries. In fact, if you continue in this condition, I wouldn't be shocked if you lost your big form permanently. You know what, at this point the strain may be shortening your life. Both Gran Torino and All Might grimaced with dark looks coming over their faces. You don't have to tell me. It's just shocking that someone could hurt you this bad. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen you injured before, Izuku said with a grimace. That got a sigh out of the two and they shared a quick look. It happened about 5 years ago, started All Might with a frown. I was fighting a villain and he was the deadliest I have ever come across and I gave everything I had and even then, I was barely able to win. I was a breath away from death. Put it this way, kid, Gran Torino interjected. Anyone other than Tashinori would be paced. Hell, he almost was. Sounds actually horrifying, thought Izuku with a bit of sweat forming on his back. Wanting to change the subject, Izuku took a deep breath. Okay. Well, I'm not a doctor, but I'm telling you not to go into your big form until after we're done. Those are the I'm not really a doctor but doctor's orders. He tried to say sternly, but his expression came off as more of a nervous grimace. Gran Torino smirked, and All Might let loose a chuckle. So, what were you doing when we got here? Asked Gran Torino. Obviously he had been wanting to ask for a while, based on the gleam in his eye. Oh, Izuku stammered. Well, I was training my quirk. I'm trying to master creating metals. And you started with gold? Gran Torino asked with an unimpressed look. No, today was just gold day, Izuku said quickly. I alternate between iron, titanium, silver, gold, then tungsten. This was why he didn't want to show that off. Now Gran Torino and All Might were gonna think he was using his quirk to get rich quick, not very heroic at all. Relax, kid, shouted Gran Torino. I was kidding. Seriously, you're too tense about that quirk of yours. He finished with a snort. All Might, on the other hand, was impressed. So you can create those metals from what? Izuku smirked and raised a finger. From the tip a small orb of gold started spinning into existence. It was barely a marble but was quickly growing in size. Again, it was really nice to show off for once. After a couple of seconds, it weighed exactly 1 gram. Again, months of practice turned 15 minutes of focus for 1 milligram to a couple seconds for a gram. Improvement. With a flick of his finger, the small marble melded into the large sphere. When he looked up, he saw the looks of surprise on both of their faces. Pretty cool, huh? He asked with a grin. All Might nodded slowly while Gran Torino swallowed excitedly. Can you make food? Fish sticks specifically? Dinner's almost ready, his mother shouted from the kitchen. That was the first time Gran Torino smiled all night. Thank you very much. Can't wait. I'm starved, All Might added with a smile. Seriously, shouted Izuku as he fell out of his chair. He got no respect. Chapter 3. Izuku read through a medical textbook on human biology as he and his mother drove to UA. In their visit last night, All Might and Gran Torino informed his mother of what was going on in greater detail, such as All Might's injury and the fact that Izuku was his last hope to maintain his dwindling place as the #1 hero. Inko was noticeably shaken at the information that the symbol of peace is and has been on his last legs for half a decade. So far, Izuku, in a method that he never tell his mother, was practicing on his own lungs in preparation for All Might while also feeling his body out to make sure that the physical wouldn't reveal anything that could get him into trouble. His mother had been worried about his enhancements since he told her he did them, which wasn't a good conversation to have after the fact. He'd never seen her that mad before. So, what are we gonna do when we get there, Izuku? She asked with a raised eyebrow. Izuku swallowed nervously before answering. Answer honestly, even if it makes you worry. This was not the first time they talked about this. Yes, Inko said with a serious nod. I can accept that you're going to do what you want with your quirk. But I can't accept you doing something so dangerous without getting a second opinion. Or at least advice. I know, and I will, I just didn't want to tell people that I can create super soldiers," Izuku said firmly. "What if someone bad heard about that? Then it doesn't matter what your quirk is, since I can make you as strong as an enhancer and just as durable. I don't think there's a villain out there that could look past that." Inko reluctantly accepted that. "Yes, but now you have Recovery Girl, who is trusted by All Might and has decades of experience as a doctor and hero." Which was another blessing that she was thankful for. She too was worried about Izuku's abilities being known by the wrong sort of people. "Well, I'm not too worried about me. I'm more worried about All Might. I can do my best, but I know I'm not capable enough to make a stomach," Izuku said with a frown. Inko sighed. "Honey, I'm sure that Mr. Yagi appreciates anything you could do. It's not like he had anyone else to turn to for treatment. So, don't think he'll be upset no matter what you can or can't do. Okay?" "Okay," sighed Izuku, still reading over his medical textbook. UA was everything he imagined it would be. A massive gleaming building that just gave off the feeling of prestige. There was a large wall surrounding the campus that only had one entrance, a large opening with the golden UA emblem on the sliding doors. As Inko and Izuku walked up, they were met by All Might and Gran Torino, who walked through the opening, All Might holding 2 visitors' badges. "Welcome," All Might said with a grin at Izuku's awe-filled look. "Put these on and make sure they don't come off, or every alarm in this place is going to go off." "That damn rat," grumbled Gran Torino in the back. Izuku put on the badges and followed the 2 into the campus, All Might taking the time to explain what they were seeing. "There are a multitude of classes offered at UA. Heroics obviously, but UA is ranked 4th for general academics and 5th for business in the entire country. Also, our support department is number 1 in Japan and number 2 in the world, just behind Islands Academy." All Might pointed to a large warehouse that had loud explosions shaking the entire foundation of the building. "That's where first-year hero class 1B is training on super moves. You'll get into that later, young Midoriya." "1B?" asked Inko. "Is there a 1A?" All Might grimaced while Gran Torino rolled his eyes. "That moron expelled his entire class based off first impressions. Even I was a better teacher, and I think I was surviving off caffeine and energy bars the whole time." "I think Aizawa had a reason," All Might said, trying to placate the older man. "No, he didn't. He's not cut out for teaching. If his standards are so high that the 2% acceptance rate to UA isn't enough, then he needs to get a grip. Those students didn't even have a day to learn anything. What did that man expect?" Gran Torino said with a frown. "Iwabumi and the Taiko organization pulled all funding and support for UA after he kicked out their recommended students too." Izuku frowned. "So what did he say his reason for expelling them was? Also, why are you so upset, Gran Torino?" The old man didn't come off as that nurturing, so it was surprised that he felt that strongly for students he'd never even met. Gran Torino sighed. "Years ago I wouldn't have cared, but I guess age has turned me soft. It's the older generation's job to guide the younger, not quit on them after an hour. He claimed they had no potential for heroics." He finished with an eye roll. "The hell does that even mean?" wondered Izuku before shaking his head. "Well, it's not like we can do anything about it." "Exactly," interjected All Might. "And we've arrived at Recovery Girl's office." The door had a red cross on the front, and the inside looked like a clinic mixed with a doctor's office. Recovery Girl was a small elderly woman, even shorter than Gran Torino, and had a pink hero suit that looked like a nurse's uniform with a lab coat over it. She looked up and walked over to them when she noticed the group's arrival. "Hello dears, I'm Recovery Girl, and I hear I'll be giving a discreet physical today," she said with a kind smile toward Izuku and Inko. Inko and Izuku introduced themselves, and she gestured to an examination table that Izuku moved to sit on. Inko sat in a chair near the wall, while All Might and Gran Torino followed. "So, I'm told that you need an X-ray and full physical. Can you tell me why?" she asked while listening to his heart and lungs. Izuku took another deep breath as she listened. "My quirk lets me manipulate matter. I used it to enhance my body. My muscles and bones are stronger and denser than a normal human." Recovery Girl narrowed her eyes and continued to listen. "Yes, that would make sense," she muttered before moving to her next test. 15 minutes later, a very irate Recovery Girl was looking over her notes, while Izuku fidgeted nervously as his mother waited for the declaration that he had a terminal illness. "Young man, I have to say that you are the most foolish boy I've ever met, and that includes All Might and the many problem students I see every day," she growled as she smacked him with her cane. Izuku grimaced, not from the pain, but from the tightening of his mother's fist at Recovery Girl's words. She continued without pause. If you were even 1,000th of a percentage off, you could have crippled yourself. Altering muscles affects your nervous system, which can then affect quirk usage. After saying that, Recovery Girl sighed tiredly and sat in her rolling stool. That being said, you did everything, somehow, perfectly. Izuku beamed and looked at his mother, who looked like she could fly from the weight lifted from her shoulders, and that made him smile even more. I told you, Mom, he said with a smile. I spent years prepping before I did it. But, cut in Recovery Girl, making Izuku duck his head. Your body isn't suited for the enhancements, there's no immediate issue, she said to Inko before she could start worrying. But if you wish to continue enhancing yourself, then you must make sure your organs can withstand the strain. She continued. People with enhancement quirks, strength or speed or what have you, have enhanced physiology to keep up with their power. Like their lungs can take in more oxygen and their heart is stronger. You have the organs of a normal non-enhanced person with the muscles and bones of an enhancer. You added quite a bit of weight due to the bones and muscles changes, so it takes more energy to move. If you acquired that kind of weight naturally, like through training, then the rest of your body would have grown to acclimate. Izuku frowned. So my organs, specifically lungs and heart, are under more strain? That was news to him. He didn't feel weaker. Not too much. I'd say that you wouldn't notice until you were put through an intense stamina training session. That being said, you will tire faster than an enhancer who can keep up with you, and you may suffer consequences if you continue to build yourself up. With that said, Recovery Girl set aside her notebook. I'll give you the clean bill of health, but I would urge you to come to me after any more changes to your body so that I can make sure everything is working properly. Izuku nodded. Of course, my biggest fear with going to the doctor was people finding out I can enhance others and that putting a big target on my back. It had been eating away at him for years actually, which is why he never said anything about it to anyone until recently. If a villain or someone with less than good intentions learned of it, then not only would he, but his mother too, would be in danger. That I understand, Recovery Girl said with a tired sigh. When I was young, the government assigned protection to me so that I wasn't kidnapped for my quirk. I was one of the most powerful healers back in my day. Really? Izuku asked incredulously. Although he supposed that made sense, she was old enough that quirks were only about century and a half old, so she could have been one of the first healing quirks. That would have indeed made her a target now that he really thought about it. Oh yes, back when I was young there weren't any heroes that had a healing quirk. I was the first, she confirmed. Recovery Girl quickly moved on. Now enough about that. She gestured for All Might to come over. I don't want to allow this, but I am going to have you work on All Might. Now I want you to walk me through your process. Tell me before you do anything. All Might laid on the examination bed and went to remove his shirt. You don't have to remove your shirt, my quirk works through that, said Izuku with a slight grimace when he saw the wound again. Recovery Girl shook her head. I need to be able to monitor what's happening and I can't see through a shirt. Understood, Izuku said before taking a breath and spreading out his senses. Inko walked over. I'm going to wait outside till you're done, don't want to distract you. Izuku frowned as he turned to her. Actually, you might want to just head home. My bone enhancements took 26 hours to complete. So even while this isn't as extensive, it will still take a long time to finish. That was news to everyone in the room. You kept focus on something that precise for over a whole day? All Might asked in shock. When did you do that? Shouted his mother. She would have remembered her son not moving for over a day. Izuku rubbed the back of his head. It was about a year ago when you went to visit Dad. I had the weekend to myself. He turned to All Might. I had to prepare myself ahead of time, but I was so busy that I didn't have time to think about how long I was working. It also helps that I wasn't creating anything new, merely altering and changing what was already there. My bones still operate, and will grow like normal, they are just tougher. Mollified, both All Might and Recovery Girl went back to what they were doing, while his mother moved over to him. So, this could take a long time? Inko asked with a frown. Izuku nodded. I'd rather be surprised at how quick it goes than have you wait for a long time expecting it to be done fast. While healing was far quicker than enhancing, as he was just influencing and moving things around to speed up the body, he would have to do a lot of work on All Might's lung before any of that was possible. Inko nodded and Gran Torino walked over to her. I'll take you back to the entrance, this place can be like a maze. After wishing them luck, both Inko and Gran Torino left, leaving Izuku and Recovery Girl to prep for the procedure. I will be starting with the less affected areas, larynx, trachea, and left main bronchus. There isn't too much work that needs to be done there, I just need to give them a push to start healing. Izuku informed, with Recovery Girl pulling up pictures and scans of the mentioned areas. Then I will focus on his diaphragm, that needs the most work from me due to all the scarring, but it is still less severe than his left lung. That's basically a net. Recovery Girl made notes and put on a pair of gloves. She wasn't going to be doing anything, but she wanted to be ready in case something went wrong. What about all the scar tissue from his surgeries? Won't that be in the way? Oh, not at all, smiled Izuku. That's all his skin. It'd be difficult if it were artificial grafts or something else, but since it's his DNA, I just have to rearrange it so it looks normal. Removing scars was the first thing I learned how to heal. Now Izuku wondered how he was going to be able to say this next part. It wouldn't sound nice, but he needed to tell them. While I'm working, I can't have anyone distract me. I can't lose focus, or I may hurt you. So, once I start, you can't interrupt me unless it is truly dire, said Izuku with a firm look. That means, All Might, that you will have to lay still and quiet for a while. We can take breaks after each section, but that's the most I'll allow. I would prefer we do the whole thing at once, but that might be unrealistic. Izuku knew that Recovery Girl was already hesitant to do this in the first place, but he effectively told her to back off as he worked. Hopefully she didn't take it personally. Instead of anger, he was met with a resigned sigh. I expected as much, she said. There isn't much for me to do in the first place, and I'm just monitoring for emergencies and to provide insight if you need it. You're the lead here. Now that was out of the way, he could begin. Unlike the scans from before, Izuku focused completely on All Might's larynx. There was damage, scarring from surgeries, and trauma from what he could only speculate was a hammer being shoved down his throat. But as Izuku started mending the tissue, removing all damaged and repairing it through his quirk, he became more confident. He had been worried that his skill at healing his own body wouldn't transfer over due to each person being different. Which in hindsight was stupid. It was still a human body, and while it was extremely damaged, it was still fixable. Also, he wasn't creating anything from scratch, so there wasn't anything truly beyond him that he would have to do today. As well, the larynx wasn't too damaged, as the surgeries were able to mostly save it. He was able to remove and heal all the damaged tissue and fix the scarring quite quickly. Okay, I'm done, he said with a sigh, shocking the two. All Might's head shot up. You're finished with the procedure? It's only been an hour, he shouted in awe, while Recovery Girl was giving him a shocked look. No, sorry, said Izuku, feeling bad he didn't specify. That was the larynx. I'm done with the larynx. We have a long way to go. Oh, muttered All Might as he laid back down. Recovery Girl sighed tiredly. You weren't kidding when you said this could take a long time. Well, settle in, because that was the part that required the least amount of work, stressed Izuku as he cracked his neck. From here we're going to work on the trachea. UA faculty gathered at least once a week, usually on Saturday or Sunday, so no lesson plans were interrupted or rushed to make the meeting. Many of the faculty also had to balance hero work with their teaching schedule, so their meetings were held around lunch on the weekends, so that the early risers or night owls had time to get here. Niza watched as most of his staff gathered into their meeting room. Vlad King looking exhausted as he just finished a weekend session of super move training, something his whole class begged for. Midnight was looking normal in casual attire, as she just arrived from her day off. Lunch Rush, Cementos, Snipe, Ectoplasm, and Hound Dog all arrived in their hero costumes. Bringing up the rear was Aizawa, who was also in casual gear, and present Mike, who was in a business suit for whatever reason. Thank you for gathering, started Niza with a smile. We have much to discuss. First is the new coming term and the entrance exam for recommended students, as well as any suggestions for the standard exam. Power Loader is working overtime to make sure that the robots are all prepared and up to our standards, which is why he is absent. Midnight leaned forward. I believe that we should mix up the recommended exam, perhaps an obstacle course rather than a spar with one of us. Not everyone is going to be combat ready before coming here. We need to make sure to test the students, not just their quirks. They were recommended for a reason. Their previous exam pushed out a recommended student that possessed a student whose quirk allowed them to analyze anything they looked at, not too much for combat, and they lost out for the more powerful offensive quirks. Agreed, added Aizawa. If we only look for flashy quirks, then we'll have more students with no actual potential. His words got grumbles from half of the room. Niza gave Aizawa a look. We have discussed your dismissal of your class. While it is within your right, day 1 mass expelling is far from what we will repeat. We took a big hit in the media after that. Ectoplasm's deep echo voice sounded. As of now, our school could be up for review if Taiko decides to push this. Uwabami at least only talked about it when asked. Now let's move on from that. Niza interrupted before the same argument could be had for the 10th, no, 11th time. Anyone want to add to Midnight's suggestion? Snipe raised his hand. If we do an obstacle course, we should add some bots for the lads and lasses, that way it's not just a race. Give them something to look out for, needing to take out a set amount or something. Multitasking is super important, shouted Mike with a grin. Can't have all the little listeners just running, that'll just teach tunnel vision. Growls from Hound Dog. I want to be a part of the interviews this year. Nothing more to add, and Niza nodded as he wrote that down. Now I think we should move on to the standard exam, said Nizu. The one with the most issue with that exam is always Recovery Girl, Midnight said with a frown. Where is she? Not just Recovery Girl, interjected Aizawa with a tired sigh. Where's All Might? He's not skipping out on meetings already, is he? Niza smiled hearing that. It was a reminder of what was happening over in the medical area. All Might is undergoing a procedure that should fix his respiratory system. Recovery Girl is assisting, he informed, and took a certain amount of glee in their shock. Even Aizawa looked stunned. After all, none of them were in the dark at the level of trauma the number one had, and how he was unlikely to ever be fully healed beyond what had already been fixed. Niza pressed a few buttons on the pad in front of him, and the monitor in the room pulled up a live feed of Recovery Girl's infirmary. All Might was laying on the examination table with his shirt off while Recovery Girl was monitoring his vitals, and most curiously was Izuku Midoriya, who was frowning with his eyes closed and a bit of sweat gathered on his forehead as he focused. Who is that young man? Questioned Vlad King, the first to speak as the rest were taking in what they were seeing. Midnight grinned, easily sinking back into her persona, one that Niza hypothesized was her actual persona that she pushed down. He's a cutie, so focused it makes me tingle, she gushed. That is Izuku Midoriya, Niza informed. He is young man that All Might met a few months ago, right after he was hired here. He possesses a truly interesting quirk from what I've been able to gather. Which the staff knew meant that he had been spying the entire time. If the procedure goes how I suspect, then All Might should gain a few hours of time in his hero form, Niza said with a pleased smile. And the boy, growled Hound Dog. Who is he exactly? Why is something so delicate being trusted to a child? Niza pulled up a file on his personal pad, one he had been building since this morning. Izuku Midoriya, 15, he lives locally with his mother Inko Midoriya. Has applied for the UA Hero exam in 3 months. Quirk, manipulation of small things. Genius level IQ. Enrolled in the fight dojo as of 7 months ago, and has only 3 confirmed wins in fights at the dojo out of 243. He is also under minor level surveillance by the Hero Commission and Japanese government. Niza's eyes took on a slight manic look as he said the last 2. As the faculty made sounds of shock and protest, Aizawa narrowed his eyes at the monitor. How is manipulation of small things capable of healing All Might, who was looked at by some of the best in our country? At the question, everyone else took on curious looks as Niza's grin spread even further. That connects to the reason he is under surveillance, minor as it is. Izuku Midoriya at age 4 went to counseling to learn more about his quirk. It was there that the doctor deduced what the quirk was capable of by having him manipulate a glass of water, where he could manipulate the individual molecules. Both the doctor and his mother understood the implications, and the appointment ended there. Mrs. Midoriya was smart as she tried to cover for her son, but the doctor was legally required to submit his report to the government when she registered it. Ever since then, the government and Hero Commission have monitored him. He is capable of manipulating anything in the universe that weighs under 5 kilograms. The government is monitoring because he is the second Class 1 threat to the world economy, as he is capable of creating whatever he wants if he knows how, such as precious metals or actual currency. While the Hero Commission is lightly monitoring, as is their secret procedure when a child is born with a Class 4 or higher level quirk. This has happened many times, most notably was Hawks, whose wings were labeled Class 4 and he was trained by the Commission personally from age 8. Niza turned off the monitor showing the ongoing procedure, which by Niza's count was in its 5th hour. With his ability and control, I would have thought he would have applied for the recommendation exam, especially if he knows All Might, President Mike said without his normal commentator voice. Some of the others agreeing while a discussion was about to start about the boys' abilities or their personal opinions on the Commission's tactics. As fascinating as it was, Niza needed them to move on. I believe we were speaking about the entrance exam. I will be speaking with Recovery Girl when she is available. Aizawa sighed tiredly. Unfortunately, we can't change too much with the number of applicants we get every year. The robots and written exam are still the best choice of getting the best applicants. He received several incredulous looks at that. I'm not saying that they still have any potential, just that it's the best we can do with the hand we have to deal. Aizawa clarified. He wasn't going to take back his decision. That last class was atrocious, and he stood by it, and will until he dies. Nizu wrote down his thoughts before addressing the next issue. How will we be handling the final exams for the current year? With that, the meeting continued for the rest of the faculty while Nizu continued to monitor the procedure on his personal pad while looking into the Midoriyas through any avenue he could access. They were curious humans, especially the father. He really couldn't find much of anything on the man. How curious. Recovery Girl took a much-needed sip from her water as she looked over at Izuku Midoriya. He was sat in a chair next to All Might in a sort of meditative position, fists clenched, knuckles pressed together, as they rested on his lap as his head was down and eyes were closed. She had to admire his focus, nearly 16 hours non-stop. She had been too scared to wipe the sweat from his forehead at first, but noticed after hour 6 that he was too focused to notice her movements anymore. The larynx really was telling at how long this was going to take. The easiest and least damaged area took over an hour. At the moment he was focused on the lung after having just finished the diaphragm, and it was hour 5, and she had no way of monitoring the progress. The process was so gradual that All Might didn't feel it as it happened and was able to stay awake for the process so far. Even though the man had spent most of the day napping as Izuku worked. Gran Torino came back a few hours ago after escorting Inko, but left to do whatever that man did in his free time when he realized that Izuku had everything handled. As she took another sip of her water, she saw Izuku open his eyes and stretch his arms. Quickly standing and moving to All Might's side, she began to check his vitals, specifically O2. It isn't perfect. Izuku sighed. His lung was really bad and so was most of it, but he is in a condition that he can get professional treatment at this point. I just have to fix the scarring, which should only take a few minutes at most. With that, she watched in fascination as All Might's chest, which had a litany of scars from injuries and surgeries, was slowly morphed and changed until it looked like any normal chest. How was that so fast? She asked in wonder. She thought it would take an hour or two, not less than 5 minutes. It took so long because I had to repair his organs by slowly healing and pushing his body to do a lot of the work. Picture it as his body walking around in the dark, not knowing where to go to fix him, while I provided a small flashlight. It was a slow process because for his body to heal and still operate normally, I had to coax the body into doing it, albeit at a tremendous speed comparatively to normal. For the scarring, I just had to move it around and fix it. I've done that more times than I'd care to admit on myself, so I'm practiced at it. Explained Izuku as he gulped down a large glass of water before repeating the process 2 more times. Looking down, she could already see the difference in All Might. His body wasn't as sunken and damaged looking. He was still small and weak looking at the moment, but she could tell just by looking at him that he was going to be in a much better condition once he woke up. Speaking of, Recovery Girl shook All Might awake with the man taking a reflexive gasp from waking so suddenly. Normally he'd wince in pain and have a bit of blood leak from the strain, but neither happened. All Might took a breath, a deep one. I had forgotten what that felt like. A full deep breath. And for the first time in years, the patented smile of the number 1 hero wasn't painted on. He actually felt like smiling. Taking a deep breath, he flexed to his muscled form. He could feel some of his older strength return to him. He could feel a few more hours returned. But he knew, as much as it pained him to think about, his body was still too strained to support his quirk like it did pre-injuries. He may have 6 to 8 hours, but he'd still have his smaller form. How do you feel? Asked Izuku. I wasn't able to perfectly fix you, but at this point someone might be able to. All Might grinned at Izuku. I feel many times better. My boy, I don't know what to say. Before I met you, I had given up hope on so much as living comfortably. Good, nodded Izuku. Now I'm going to pass out. Don't worry, this is part of it. I slept for 2 days after my own procedures. Almost immediately after saying that, Izuku's head fell back and he passed out in his chair. Recovery Girl sighed. Honestly, if he didn't do that, I was going to make him sleep. He didn't stop the whole time. I'm sure he's exhausted on a mental level few could imagine. Do you have his mother's information? We'll have to tell her what happened. I might as well keep him overnight. I want to get some fluids in him too, she said mostly to herself while All Might carried him to the next bed over. You were right, he is heavier than he looks. said All Might as he sat him down. I'd suspect around 80 kilograms, and that's quite heavy for his size. All Might watched as Recovery Girl set an 4 into Izuku and followed her out when she deemed him fine. He clenched his fist with a grin. He could already tell some of his old strength was roaring and raring to go. Chapter 4. Izuku knew that the migraine would be bad when he agreed to work on All Might. He knew that it would be terrible when he went full throttle and worked for nearly 17 hours nonstop. But waking up to pain so intense that he didn't even bother opening his eyes, he merely sat up and sensed around himself to see if anyone was there. He didn't feel anyone near him, which meant he was in the room by himself. Based on the smell of the room and the general feel of it, he was still in the infirmary that he healed All Might. Feeling outward, he recognized the feel of glass and water. Using his quirk in its simplest manner, he telekinetically brought the glass of water over to him and took several large gulps. I see your quirk isn't affected by such a terrible headache, mused a soft voice from next to his bed. Soft as it was, it still got a hiss from Izuku. Who's there? He whispered as soft as he could. Much as he hated it, he would have to talk with whoever was there. Them being able to avoid his senses was interesting, though. Sorry to startle you, Mr. Midoriya, the voice answered softly, just loud enough that he could barely hear it but soft enough that it caused the least amount of pain. I have notified Recovery Girl, she is on her way to help you, but I came to make sure you were alright. Still didn't answer his question on who he was. At least Izuku thought the voice was male. Who are you? Izuku asked again, while trying to lessen his migraine with his quirk but couldn't focus due to the pain. I am the principal of this school, my name is Nizu. The voice introduced itself and Izuku peeked as much as he could to look at the principal. It wasn't what he was expecting, but it wasn't a person in front of him, rather it was like a mouse thing that had bare features or something. Izuku just closed his eyes and ignored that train of thought. Izuku raised a thumbs up and went back to ignoring his migraine while he guessed Nizu just stared at him. It was starting to get awkward when the sound of the door opening caught his attention, then light steps moved toward him. Well, dearie, migraines are something I can help with, Recovery Girl said with a smile before giving his head a light kiss, activating her quirk. It was almost instant, the headache faded, and he sat up quickly. The strain of Recovery Girl's quirk was well known to those who know her. It was a drain on stamina equal to the size of the injury, and he had plenty of stamina for a headache. Izuku grinned at Recovery Girl. How long was I out? The elderly woman looked at the clock. About 16 hours, it's about 2 o'clock on Sunday. My mom? Izuku asked. He didn't want to be the one to have to let her know what happened after over a day since seeing her. Already taken care of. All Might told her I wanted to keep you overnight. She is waiting on your call, explained Recovery Girl with a smile. The weight of his mother's worry off his shoulders let Izuku relax with a sigh. It was then that Nizu re-entered the conversation. So, Mr. Midoriya, I had a few questions to ask you, Nizu said with a gentle smile, while his eyes glinted with a sharpness that caught Izuku off guard. Yeah? Nizu leaned forward. Would you be interested in our recommendation exam? Izuku tilted his head. That wasn't exactly what he was expecting. I never thought about it, never knew anyone that high up to get one. All Might expressed interest in offering you a spot if you wanted it, explained Nizu. Frowning in thought, Izuku shook his head. I'm good, I'll get in the normal way. Oh? Is it because you don't want to accept a perceived handout? Nizu posed with a growing grin. Izuku coughed. Yeah. While thinking, honestly, it's more because the regular exam is public knowledge and I've been planning to kill robots, not whatever the special exam is. Nizu either bought that or went along with it as he grinned further and clapped his paws together. Marvelous! I will look forward to your performance in the exam in 2 months' time. My next question is a bit more personal. I was creating a file for you and a name came up. Takashi Asato. What is your relationship to this man? Asato Takashi? Izuku was good at remembering names and faces. His memory was practically perfect, and he was drawing a complete blank on this. Maybe his mother knew. No, he would know of anyone that would come up in his file. Speaking of file. No idea who that is, and what file? Asked Izuku with a small frown. He wasn't even a student, and this rat bear thing was looking into him. Nizu raised both paws in a surrender. I feel it would be foolish to not start building my file on a future student. Even more foolish to think you wouldn't make it in. Nothing too personal, I assure you, just info I gather on most, I assure you. Izuku could accept that for now, so he let the principal continue. As for the name, Mr. Asato is a high-ranking officer in the Detnerak Corporation. Last year he made an inquiry into your Quirk file, then another a week later. That was worrying. He knew of the company. It was a lifestyle company for people whose quirks made it difficult to live normally. They were huge, top 10 in Japan, huge, and with as much political pull as they had. It wouldn't surprise him if they had people who could look into government documents. But why him? Izuku frowned. I don't know him nor anyone at that company. My father works abroad, and my mother doesn't work. A glint shone in Nisa's eyes when he mentioned his father. And what does your father do? Izuku wasn't dumb enough to answer that question blindly. It was obvious now that Nisa led him to that question. It would take someone with the principal's pull, one phone call, or a few clicks to see that he didn't know of this Asato person. Izuku just gave up the info about his parents, specifically his father, without realizing. Not that he knew why that was bad or why he was suspicious, but he suddenly got the feeling of not giving out information recklessly. He works in a support company overseas. Nothing special, but it pays well. Shrugged Izuku with a smile. Although if he ever decided to retire, I could just sell some gold or something. He shrugged. I see, although I wouldn't recommend using your quirk like that, Nisa said with a smile. I think I have all my questions answered, Mr. Midoriya, and I suspect I will see you at the start of term. With that, Nisa scurried out of the infirmary while Recovery Girl, who Izuku completely forgot was here, spoke up from her desk she had been working at. Don't mind Nizu, he's a curious thing, she assured him. I suggest you let your mother know that you're ready to be picked up. Izuku nodded and reached over to the side table where his things were. It was a tough, but his work was finished. He'll have to talk to All Might to see how things are going now. Izuku stretched while standing across from Kaminari. Master Ryujin was overlooking their training personally today, as they were less than a week before the exam, and it would be their last session before mandatory rest before the exam. Izuku had an impressive 4 wins in over 300 matches, while Kaminari had apparently made some headway into his quirk and wanted a spar with him. So here they were. I'm hoping you're the easy one. I hear you are, Kaminari said with a snicker. It was no secret that Izuku was on an impressive losing streak. I remember beating you on my first day, and I've improved since then, Izuku said with an eye roll. Not his fault that he'd been forced to fight the high-level guys, so he didn't hurt someone with his strength. That's enough, you two, cut in Ryujin with a smirk. This is going to be your last fight before the exam, boys, and I want it to be good. Izuku calmed his breathing. This wouldn't be as bad as the last fight he had, but he needed to be ready as Kaminari's quirk was very strong while he's handicapped to not using his quirk, just his strength. Now no excessive use of your quirks. Ryujin looked at Kaminari as he said that, but waited for both of them before continuing. We will go until knockout or submission. Begin. Izuku took a breath before exploding toward Kaminari, who unlike last time held a more confident posture that seemed looser. Izuku's starting punch was a simple straight right. During the 10 months of time Izuku has been at Fight Dojo, his strikes have become a thing of legend. Every person that has fought him knew of the weight of his fists. The bigger ones tried to parry with their bulk, while the smaller, quicker ones used their speed to avoid them. The power of Izuku's fist was enough that full contact usually meant that he won the fight. That was why he's won 4 times when it was clear that the decade or more training his opponents had meant he was never supposed to win. Until today, where a straight right from Izuku, bearing quite a bit of his strength, was caught in the hand of Kaminari Denki, whose eye twitched with effort, but he smirked at Izuku. Surprised? He asked while golden sparks of electricity were coming off of his hand all the way up to his shoulder, barely noticeable at first, but now it was obvious. Kaminari gripped his palm and did a throw to toss Izuku onto his side. Izuku rolled to his feet just in time to see a sparking Kaminari in his range lashing out with a straight right of his own. Izuku blocked the punch, but felt a slight jolt from the electricity coursing through Kaminari. You're coating your body in your lightning? Asked Izuku as he rubbed his forearm that he used to block. I'm guessing that you are using it to energize and empower your muscles, giving you more physical power while also slightly shocking your target? I would guess that this is a very difficult move to pull off, and your limit must be a single limb at the moment, and that there is a time limit? Kaminari had a dumb look on his face as his arms dropped comically. Huh! How'd you figure all that out? Izuku grinned. Let's say that I'm a quirk enthusiast, and yours is the second strongest in the dojo that I know of. Izuku got back into his stance and clenched his fists. Izuku exploded forward and lashed out with a faster straight right that Kaminari hesitated to catch and dodged. Not expecting it to hit in the first place, Izuku flowed into a left straight that was blocked by Kaminari. Izuku rotated his hips and put nearly all of his power into a right haymaker that Kaminari ducked under with a hair's worth of space to spare. Izuku grinned at him as their eyes locked and continued to rotate and lashed out with a right kick into Kaminari's guard. Kaminari was thrown across the room, sprawled on the ground with a grunt. Izuku heard muttering and turned to see several of the people from the dojo watching on the sidelines next to Master Ryujin, who had a massive grin on his face as he watched. "You okay?" Izuku called out. Kaminari grunted before jumping back up to his feet. "Yeah, I'm okay, let's go." Kaminari took the initiative and rocketed forward. Izuku tried to see where he would strike by looking for yellow lightning but didn't see any. Kaminari jumped and did a double drop kick that Izuku was so stunned to see he could only raise his guard. As soon as he felt impact, he felt a much larger shock jolt through his arms. The force caused him to slide back and he nearly lost balance when Kaminari springboarded off him. Izuku grunted at the shocks but got back within striking distance and ducked low and sent a left uppercut that was avoided but opened up for a spinning back fist that rocked Kaminari enough that Izuku followed up with a chest kick. Kaminari's entire body exploded with sparks right as the kick landed. Izuku felt more pain from the jolt, and he noticed that Kaminari's body didn't look as hurt from the kick as it should have been. Izuku hummed to himself as he thought about his next move. Kaminari was wily enough that he would be able to take him head-on. Physically he had Kaminari beat, but his quirk was leveling the playing field more than expected. Switching it up, Izuku put up his guard and waited. As soon as Kaminari got close he'd take him down. The blonde didn't hesitate as he rushed forward, his right hand crackling with lightning that caused a tingle to spread across Izuku's skin. Kaminari sent a straight right punch that Izuku ducked under and countered with a right of his own to Kaminari's chin. Unfortunately, the punch rocked Kaminari enough that his extended right fell right onto Izuku's back. The condensed lightning was so strong that Izuku felt it go through his whole body, knocking him off his feet. Some chuckles were heard in the background as both Izuku and Kaminari slowly got to their feet. Okay, his lightning is far more powerful when he builds it up, meaning it isn't an instant move, rather a stockpiling technique. He built up for that hit as he rushed me, but if I pressure him, he won't have the chance to do that again. Also, it felt different to when he blocks. I've been using about 30% strength so far, time to up that. Izuku strategized mentally as he got to his feet. Kaminari got up while rubbing his jaw. "You got some serious power, man. If you put more into that, I'd be seeing stars. Don't want to take your head off by accident," Izuku said with a snort before grimacing. "That being said, if I didn't get shocked again, that'd be great." Kaminari smirked as his hands began crackling with lightning. "As if..." Izuku rushed forward, banking on his offensive pressure to keep Kaminari from building up too much lightning. Kaminari met him halfway and lashed out with a left hook that Izuku ducked under and sent a left kick to Kaminari's chest that was caught by Kaminari's right arm but managed to push him back a bit. Pulling back and recentering, Izuku pushed back in but was met with a right punch from Kaminari that he had to block. Instead of the minor jolt, the shock that came from the punch was a massive shock even greater than the one from earlier. Izuku fell onto his back as he was assaulted by the lightning. However, he was able to recover and roll away from a punch that slammed into the ground where he was. The lightning, which Izuku suspected was the same amount as he was just hit by, impacted the ground, cracking the matted floor. "Okay, so he doesn't need to build it up, got it," muttered Izuku to himself. Izuku rushed forward trying to put Kaminari back onto defense, and sent out a right then left then another, and continued to barrage Kaminari with as many punches as fast as he could. It got to the point that Kaminari had to pick and choose which hits he took because he couldn't dodge or block all of them. It was the advantage of his enhancements that he didn't have to worry about fatigue from using a quirk. It was just his body's natural power now, so he could keep this up for quite a while. Although based on Recovery Girl's findings he shouldn't try and push it to a battle of attrition. Kaminari took a punch to the side and exploded with yellow lightning that spread throughout the mat, shocking Izuku and anything in a 2-meter range. Kaminari fell to his knees while Izuku bent over as he grunted and fought through the pain. Out of breath, both Izuku and Kaminari slowly moved toward one another and began the last exchange of the match. Kaminari punched forward and the strike was blocked by Izuku, who punched forward into Kaminari's guard, but it was still too much and the blonde was rocked with an enhanced right fist to his cheek. Izuku took a few deep breaths as the pain was still pulsing through his body as he looked at the downed Kaminari, who wasn't unconscious but was down for the count. He may have put more strength into that punch than he should have, around 50%, but he was really getting tired of being shocked. Cheers and claps echoed through the room as Ryujin approached. "That was fantastic! Both of you have drastically improved from that first fight. Kaminari, you were ready for his strength and was able to counter it for a bit. Izuku, you actually have good technique now and can flow through movements quite well. Kaminari sluggishly pulled himself to his feet. That was one hell of a punch at the end. He groaned. Izuku chuckled. I really didn't want to get shocked again, so I wanted to end it there. I thought you needed to build up your lightning for the bigger shocks, but toward the end you had much more lightning without any build-up. Yeah, I spent so much time just releasing all of my power in a single burst, so summoning power isn't an issue. Now it's about fine-tuning my control, explained Kaminari while rubbing his cheek. I could have put out more, but I get nervous about using too much power and my strikes cause the shocks are more direct than before, so I could stop someone's heart if I'm not careful. Izuku hummed and thought. He never considered the danger of a quirk like his. A defibrillator was around 1000 volts, and he's heard that Kaminari was capable of putting out over 1,000,000 before a quirk backfire. Maybe you could try and put your lightning into a fingertip to give you a point to focus on. Maybe that would give you piercing power or something? Your quirk isn't natural lightning, so I'm not sure how it would work, posed Izuku as he looked at the ground in thought. Ryujin laughed. You never stop, Midoriya. Even after losing fights you would always give tips about your opponent's quirk. Izuku coughed as he tried to hide a blush while Kaminari was staring at his pointer finger that had a few sparks emanating from it. Then his head shot up. Wait. What did you mean that my quirk isn't natural lightning? Well, lightning is over 20,000 degrees Celsius and has about 1,000,000,000 joules of energy. If you had that, I think you'd kill people in a punch. Izuku explained with a smile. After all, a lightning bolt was possible to create with his quirk. It was just plasma and electrons. Wow, said a stunned Kaminari. Ryujin clapped and got their attention. Now my final thoughts on this bout. Kaminari, you are on the right path of your quirks, so there isn't much to say other than continue to train your body and practice with your quirk. If your body's toughness increases as does your control, then I think you'll be able to handle more power. Kaminari nodded as he clenched his fist. Izuku, you need to continue to practice with your technique and get more experience with hand-to-hand. I can't give you more than that. You both are on the right track and I look forward to seeing where your strengths take you. Both Izuku and Kaminari bowed to their master as he walked away. So, you ready for the written exam? Izuku asked. Kaminari groaned. I'll pass, but I'm seriously dreading it. Well, if Izuku were to be honest, he would be shocked, no pun intended, if Kaminari didn't get into UA. His quirk was seriously powerful, and he was getting better with it every day. With how the world worked, focusing more on quirks than individuals, he was sure that even if Kaminari did subpar on the written exam, then his practical would cover for it. So, what do you do when you're not training? Kaminari asked as they walked toward the locker rooms to change. Got a girlfriend or something, or boyfriend? He asked lamely at the end. Izuku chuckled. No girlfriend, and I usually, as boring as it sounds, just study in my free time or practice with my quirk. Kaminari grimaced. You study? That's terrible. I've been going to the beach. All this training has given me quite the bod. Ladies love em. He grinned cockily as he took off his gi to change while gesturing to his six-pack. I don't know how to talk to girls like that. Izuku laughed nervously. Talk normally, sure, that's easy, you know? But trying to ask them out or something, no way. Really? You've got a strong quirk, way smarter than me, and have some serious muscle. Don't be nervous, just talk a bit more personally when you see a cutie, you may be surprised. Kaminari said with some encouragement. Izuku hummed as he put on his normal clothes. Maybe I will, who knows? So, do you have a girlfriend then? Kaminari's head dropped. I had a few dates recently but no girlfriends. Maybe my luck will change at UA. He cheered to himself with a fire in his eyes. Izuku grinned. Who knows, maybe both of us will get a girlfriend at UA. Crazier things have happened. Izuku muttered the last part to himself while thinking of his time with All Might. Arriving at the entrance to the fight dojo, Kaminari and Izuku went their separate ways, both promising to meet up at the entrance exam. Are you sure you're ready? Asked his mother nervously from the kitchen. Do you have your bag and clothes and a plan? Are you sure you're ready to fight and the test is supposed to be hard, or meeting new people at the exam? What if the teachers single you out? Izuku stared at his mother with wide eyes as she spiraled in worry. He moved to intervene when she worried that he was going to have to fight a villain caught by All Might to the death for his entrance into the school. Mom! It's going to be fine, Izuku said as he grabbed her shoulders. I don't think they have fights to the death until the second week of class. he joked, getting a sigh out of his mother. Sorry, but I worry, she said with a small laugh. I know you'll do great. Izuku hugged his mother, which she reciprocated. He smiled to himself. His mother really was his #1 supporter. He wondered what his dad was doing. Or what he thought about him going to UA, well, to take the exam, or if he even knew. Have you talked to Dad? Izuku asked with a slight frown. He hadn't spoken to his dad in a while. Inko sighed tiredly. I have. He's rooting for you, but you know how difficult it is for him to get in touch where he is, she said as she looked away sadly. Izuku didn't say anything because he loved his father. As rarely as they got to talk in the past few years, he was still someone he loved, and that probably wouldn't change. But he noticed the toll it took on his mother to not have him here. His mother's beautiful, and she got a good bit of attention from people, and as bad as it was to think maybe she and his dad should move on, they were in practically different lives at this point. But Izuku didn't dare voice that. He knew that his parents still spoke nearly every other day, or at the minimum once a week. So, it was different for them than for he and his father, but there were times when he noticed his mother was quite lonely. I didn't mean to upset you, I just didn't know if he knew I was taking the exam or not, Izuku said with a small smile that perked his mother up a bit. She shook her head. No, I know that. I just feel bad at how hard it is to stay a family when he lives on the other side of the world. Anyway, good luck, you're going to be late. Izuku kissed her cheek and rushed out the door. It would take a quick train ride to get to UA, and from there he had a couple tests to crush. I'm on my way to UA. You? Texted Izuku to Kaminari while looking out the window of the train. Yup. My mom's dropping me off, so I'll be there in a few minutes, responded Kaminari. Good, he didn't want to have to go at it alone, and the only other person he knew that was taking the exam was Bakugo. Someone that in the past few months had been leaving him alone for the most part, but was still not someone that Izuku wanted to be around with his attitude. Maybe it changed? Who knew, but Izuku wasn't going to waste his time with someone that treated everyone like they were beneath him. So, he was going to go at it with Kaminari. Izuku zoned out as his train arrived and he made his way toward UA. Typical Japan, there was a tremendous amount of foot traffic, so he listened to his iPod while pushing through the slow walkers. Before long he was back at the illustrious school. The gates of UA were wide open to allow all the applicants in to test, and there was a steady stream of people walking in. Izuku noticed that there were a couple figures on the rooftops around the campus observing. He suspected with all the foot traffic into UA they had heroes on standby for security so that if a villain tried to use this as an opportunity, they were apprehended. Izuku was so lost in thought that he accidentally bumped into a young woman. Fortunately, he was quick enough that he steadied both of them without much of a stumble. Sorry about that, Izuku muttered as he took in the girl he bumped into. She was a bit shorter than him and was actually very attractive, short brown hair, a bit of a blush on both of her cheeks, and an easy smile on her face. Yeah, it's no biggie, I'm totally nervous too. Oh, I'm Ochako Uraraka, she said with a nervous scratch to the back of her head. Izuku found himself relaxing and smiling back. Nice to meet you, I'm Midoriya Izuku. I'm going for the hero course, you? Both of them fell in step together as they walked into the gates of UA. Oh, I'm going for the hero course too, totally crazy, huh? All these people really making me nervous. Izuku nodded. Yeah, but I feel like you know if you're going to pass or not before even taking the test. I know I'm going to pass, what about you? Ochako furrowed her brows as she looked over at him. I don't, she stammered. Nope, are you going to pass or not? Repeated Izuku with a serious look, making her gulp nervously. Pass! She shouted, getting the attention of the people around them, making her blush. Izuku laughed, making her blush a bit deeper. Then I look forward to seeing you in class, Uraraka. Shut up! She grumbled, making him chuckle even more. She got her nerves back under control before looking at him. So what's your quirk? Must be pretty cool, for you to be that confident. Oh, I can make things happen. Mostly small things, but it's pretty cool, grinned Izuku as he made a small piece of ice in the shape of a flower that he handed to her. Uraraka blushed slightly at the gift. So an ice quirk? No, not at all, Izuku said with a grin. What about you? Uraraka shook her head at his words. Yeah, whatever. Well, my quirk is called zero gravity. If I touch something with all of my fingers, I can remove its gravity, making it weightless. She did that to the small piece of ice, and they watched as it floated up into the air. Oh wow, Izuku said, stunned. Is there a limit, or are you going to send a building into the stratosphere by accident? Uraraka giggled. I've got about 3 tons as my weight limit. For now, at least. She added. Izuku thought about all the uses of her quirk and found himself believing she would pass too. That's an impressive quirk, perfect for rescue work or even close-quarters combat, mused Izuku. Uraraka smiled. Yup, that's the plan. Seeing that they were being put in designated seats, Izuku turned to Uraraka. Good luck, remember you're going to pass. Yeah, you too. Nice meeting you, Midoriya, cheered Uraraka as she rushed off to her seat. Moving up the stairs towards his seat, he noticed the wide variety of people, some with obvious mutations, some visibly sweating, and a few that looked bored. Izuku wasn't sure if the bored people were just so confident to not be worried or stupid that they didn't realize how difficult this would be. Taking his seat, he took a deep breath and got ready for the written exam. Well, that could have been worse, muttered Izuku as he went to the auditorium for the practical exam briefing. One of the applicants by him glared as he breathed into a bag heavily. Izuku chuckled nervously and looked away. Based on that, he would say that he wasn't going to be a fellow student this term. A few minutes later, and a familiar face sat next to him with a snarl. Deku, what the hell are you doing here? He growled as he glared. Izuku rolled his eyes and didn't even bother to look over. I'm taking the test same as you. Bakugo sucked his teeth but didn't say anything more as papers were passed around and the lights started to dim, signaling the beginning of the briefing. Izuku's eyes widened at present mixed entrance and bombastic voice. The man for some reason thought he needed a mic alongside his loud voice, making it nearly unbearable when combined. Apparently, they have the same old, destroy robots for points test, so Izuku was confident in his sword and shield combo with his enhancements. Worst come to worst, he could use water or ice if he needed it. No point in really holding back his quirk since Yue knew what it was capable of after helping All Might. Speaking of All Might, he got a nice text from the man last night cheering him on. After helping him 2 months ago, they hadn't seen each other much, but there were a few times that he would stop by to offer help with training. Though Izuku was proud to say he landed a few punches on the man, he lost quite quickly in their spars, not that he was expecting differently. Izuku learned the definition of overwhelming strength and speed, and it was All Might. Excuse me. Someone spoke up when President Mike asked if there were any questions. This paper and that screen indicates a 4th villain, yet you've only explained 3 of them. Izuku tuned out the rest of the boys' questions or complaint, or whatever it was. Either it was a surprise, or they hadn't gotten to it, so Izuku felt that he was jumping the gun a bit, but tensions were high so he wouldn't begrudge the guy too much. Not to worry, number 7111. That's the gimmick. I'd recommend you avoid it at all costs. It's not worth any points, answered President Mike with a finger gun directed at the boy who asked, who then thanked him and sat back down. With that, Izuku and the thousands of others in the auditorium were shuttled to their exam areas by shuttle buses after being allowed to change into more appropriate clothing, and those that needed gear were allowed to get it. As they exited, Izuku stood off to himself and concentrated. It was time to create his sword and shield. First was the sword, a straight katana or chikudo, about 2.5 kilograms in weight, made of hybrid of titanium and tungsten for sturdiness. While having gold and silver veins for aesthetic because he worked hard to learn those metals, so he'd use them. Then the shield, same weight and composition in the form of a circle, bigger than a buckler as it was enough to cover his torso but not big enough that it would weigh him down. 1 minute, he created a hybrid composition of 5 kilograms of metal out of nothing in 1 minute. That was some real improvement. He got some looks at his weapons, but he ignored them. Looking around, he smiled as he saw Uraraka and went to talk to her. But before he could, a hand grabbed his shoulder. I hope you don't plan on distracting that girl. The boy who asked President Mike the question earlier asked sternly. Izuku raised an eyebrow. We know each other. You should worry about you, not me. I'll be fine, he said with a smile. Honestly, the guy was too wound up. The boy frowned, but President Mike interrupted. Now I hope all you listeners are ready. Go. Izuku mentally shrugged as he shot forward. Something his time in the fight dojo taught him was that when someone said go, it meant go. He ignored the gasps and shouts from behind him as he found his first target, a medium-sized robot, likely a 2-pointer. Its large red lens glinted as it targeted him, but he shield bashed it before bisecting it with his sword. The sharpness of the blade in conjunction with his strength made it easy. Oh yeah, this was a good idea, Izuku said to himself as he shot forward using even more of his strength. Look at the Wonder Kid go! Laughed Midnight as she watched Izuku slice through more and more bots. Seems he decided to change his shield into another sword. How aggressive, she mused with a coy smile. All Might smiled as he watched Izuku tear through the robots with speed and precision. All Might had wanted to approach him about One for All, but he wanted to wait until he started at UA. Also, there wasn't any rush since he was able to sustain a comfortable 7 hours of his hero form with a good bit of his former strength returned. Not to mention, if Izuku accepted, his enhancements made it so that he wouldn't need much if any prep before taking the quirk anyway. There were several standout applicants. While the faculty was familiar with Izuku due to his actions a few months ago, they still noticed some others with large amounts of potential. That one has some serious firepower, said Snipe as he pointed out a boy that was blowing up robots with explosions generated from his palms. Vlad King hummed. I see quite a few that are going to be good students. There was a few more minutes in the exam, and Niza edged towards a large red button with a grin as he watched all of the screens. Izuku jumped over a 3-pointer and threw one of his swords at the bot, killing it, then sliced a 1-pointer where he landed before shooting over to pick up his second sword. He was somewhere near 60 points, he wasn't sure, but he was happily tearing through the bots in the meantime. There were many here with interesting quirks, a guy that could blast lasers from his stomach. The intense guy from earlier had engines in his legs. There was a girl that could generate force pushes from her palms and a tiger mutation quirk guy running around. He wondered what the average amount of points were. He knew he was doing really well, but he wanted to get the top score, but he didn't know what that even was. Hell, there were over 10 more examinations going on at the same time. So, who knew? Izuku rolled to the side to avoid a missile, much to his surprise that the robots had such power, and rushed forward with enough strength to crack the ground beneath him to shred the bot with his swords. He heard screams from behind him and a massive crash that caused him to spin around. There at the edge of the street was a bot towering over the surrounding buildings. It had several red lenses that scanned the area. Izuku blinked and shook his head. A gimmick, huh? That thing was a disaster. Oh well, not his problem. Not worth points, then it wasn't worth his time. Oh! A feminine voice broke through his thoughts, and he turned back around. On the ground was Uraraka, pinned under a bit of rubble trying to get free, even though her quirk should make that easy. Not hesitating for a moment, Izuku shot forward toward, pushing past and between the fleeing applicants that looked at him like he was crazy. Nearing Uraraka, he slid down next to her. You okay? What's hurt? She looked up surprised. Midoriya! Oh, my ankle, and I'm trapped under the rubble! She tried to pull her leg free, but her ankle flared up, making her wince and stop. Right as he was about to reach down to move the rubble, he spun around and saw the massive bot reaching down in a slapping motion. Stabbing the swords into the ground, Izuku raised both arms, and with a massive grunt of effort he caught the attack and nearly fell to a knee as he held the massive bot at bay. Okay then. He grunted to himself as he reached out with his quirk, and just started shredding and ripping anything in his range. Surprisingly, his range had increased since he last tested it. Now he could feel at least 15 meters out. Izuku felt the force of the bot let up as small explosions popped throughout the arm he was touching as the effects of his tampering were made known. Gritting his teeth, he pushed the robot off of him. With the system failures going on, the bot fell onto its back with a massive crash that shook the ground of the arena. Phew! Izuku sighed as he whipped his forehead. Uraraka was staring at him in shock as he reached down and lifted the rubble off of her. There wasn't much, so he was still confused on why she didn't use her quirk. Maybe she was tired? Shrugging, Izuku reached down and picked her up, getting a sputter from her as her brain caught up to his actions. WW, what are you doing? She asked with a massive blush. Izuku tilted his head. You can't walk on that ankle, so I'll carry you. Don't worry, you're not heavy or anything. He finished with a smile. The surrounding students made comments, but he ignored them. Uraraka gave up on trying to get him to drop her and just went along with, though she wasn't looking at anyone and had both hands on her cheeks. Is she all right, dearie? Asked a familiar voice that made him turn with a smile. He leaned down, still holding Uraraka. She hurt or broke her ankle? I don't think it's Dash, stammered Uraraka. Not to worry, young lady, Recovery Girl said while giving her a small kiss on the head. Uraraka was about to start getting embarrassed again, but the pain in her ankle disappeared and she was put back on her feet by Izuku. There you go, have a gummy. Recovery Girl smiled and handed her a gummy in the shape of All Might that Uraraka reluctantly took, then ate, instantly feeling a bit of energy returning to her. And how about you, any injuries I should know about? She asked Izuku with an eye roll. Izuku grinned. I'm good, I think I got a few scrapes, but I took care of them. Honestly, he considered healing Uraraka, but he wasn't 100% sure she was going to be a fellow student, and he didn't want to show too much to a random person just yet. Good, then I'll go on. With that, recovery girl went through all the groups, offering aid where needed. Izuku turned back to Uraraka. Not bad, right? He said while gesturing to the arena. Well, I think I had a good amount of points before I got stuck. She mumbled nervously. You? Oh, I think I had about 60. He thinks he kind of lost track about halfway, and he may have confused a 3-pointer with a 1 or 2 a few times. 60? She said, shocked. I think I had close to 40. Hope you have the top score, or I might not get in. I'm sure you're fine. I heard a few people saying they were doing good with 10 and 12 points. I think over 25 is a pass, not sure obviously. Izuku said, managing to calm her down a bit. Yeah, you're right, she said with a small smile. So do you live near here or did you travel for the test? I live in town, just had to take a train ride. You? I'm from your prefecture, got an apartment in town for the test, and if I get in. Izuku looked at her surprised. You're on your own? How long have you been in town? She shrugged her shoulders. I couldn't ask my parents to come with me, but I've only been here a few days. If you want, I can show you around if you'll be here for a while. You won't have to be alone. As the words left his mouth, Izuku realized that he was almost asking her out, and had a small blush cover his cheeks. Uraraka didn't seem to notice as she smiled over at him. That'd be awesome. It was super boring by myself. We need to exchange information. Izuku, stunned at his unintentional success at getting a girl's phone number, traded phones and information. You have like 5 messages from a Kaminari on here, Uraraka said with a raised eyebrow. Izuku slapped his forehead. Right, totally forgot about him. He's going to be pissed. Who's he? She asked. A friend that's taking the exam today too. We were supposed to meet up, but I guess I was too focused on you, said Izuku, getting another blush out of her before he even realized what he was saying. Oh. Well, yeah, I gotta catch my train, but I'll text you Midoriya, she said as she rushed off. Izuku just stared at where she was standing with a stunned expression. Then he thought about everything he'd done or said to her today, unintentional or not. Am I smooth? He wondered. Chapter 5. So you just decided to ditch me not 20 minutes after texting me? Kaminari asked with a frustrated frown. He had just met up with Kaminari moments after Uraraka had rushed off. Izuku rubbed the back of his head nervously. He was still shaken from his actions with Uraraka not 5 minutes ago. I'm sorry, really. I bumped into this girl and we started talking and just walked in together. Kaminari perked up. A girl? Didn't you tell me you weren't good at talking to girls? He asked with more surprise than frustration on his face now while grinning. Well, not intentionally, I guess. I just got her number and we're meeting up in the next few days, I think. Izuku said, stunned, trying not to blush at the situation. What? Shouted Kaminari. You're telling me that you were macking on a cutie without realizing it and it worked? Izuku looked down, embarrassed. I think so. Izuku felt a slap on the back as Kaminari laughed. I told you it was easy. So, what does she look like? Short brown hair, roundish face, pretty? Izuku said with a confused tilt of his head. Kaminari rolled his eyes. Fine, I shouldn't have expected more than that. So, what's your plan? Plan? Asked Izuku. Seriously? You don't have a plan? Kaminari asked with wide eyes. Did you seriously not mean to do this? Not even a little bit, Izuku exclaimed with wide eyes. She's nice and fun to talk to, but I didn't think I was doing anything too forward, but apparently I was. Kaminari hummed to himself. Then you're on your own. You got this far by accident, so I think you'll be fine on your own. Izuku rubbed his head. I don't have any idea what to do. Hasn't stopped you yet. Kaminari laughed. On that, Izuku had to agree. Both of them decided to make their way toward the buses. Deku! Bakugo shouted from behind, getting a sigh from Izuku and a curious look from Kaminari. What's up? Izuku asked amicably. He may as well be polite at the start. No use poking the bear. Bakugo took a breath. How'd you do? I got over 70 points. The trash in my area were happy about getting over a dozen. He rolled his eyes at the thought. Izuku nodded. Same in my area, but I lost track around 60. I got 52. Kaminari said with a proud puff of his chest. But there was this girl with vine hair that was taking a lot of points too. Izuku hummed while Bakugo looked at Kaminari with narrowed eyes. Who are you? You don't go to Aldera, how do you know the nerd? Nerd! Kaminari repeated with a laugh. He isn't he? But we go to the same dojo for training. Izuku frowned. I don't think I'm that big of a nerd dash. Dojo? Bakugo asked with narrowed eyes, interrupting Izuku. Which one? I go to Maximum Force. I heard of that one, Kaminari mused. A little out of my price range and too far from my house. We go to Fight Dojo, we fight with our quirks as much as we want. Our master encourages fighting to gain experience. Oh no, muttered Izuku with a sigh. Bakugo's face grew wide with a feral grin. Really? He practically purred. Kaminari didn't seem to notice as he just nodded quickly. Yeah man, it's awesome! You can fight so many different people and a lot of them are really strong. Bakugo was practically vibrating while Izuku just rubbed his forehead tiredly. Then I'll see you there, Bakugo said with his grin still wide and dangerous as he stalked off. Kaminari watched him go with a smile. Who was that? He was kinda intense, but I'm sorta excited to fight him. His face turned curious. Also, why did he call you Deku? He asked as they continued to walk towards the trains. Izuku sighed. That was a guy from my class, Bakugo Katsuki, and he calls me Deku cause it's a dumb childhood nickname. Deku? Mused Kaminari. Izuku grunted in annoyance. Never call me that, it's annoying. I'd have gotten him to stop but he never listened to me. Honestly, he's really annoying, never listens to anyone. Also, if you fight him be ready to lose, like him or not he's a beast. Kaminari looked at him in shock. Really? I figured based on his claim of getting 70 points but you're pretty tough too. Think you're stronger? Now that was a question Izuku wasn't sure of anymore. In terms of physical strength, yes, he was superior. But Bakugo had a very versatile quirk that granted high offense and high mobility mixed with his unending will, and he was an aggravating opponent. He could use his quirk in various ways to help, but it would be tough. I'm not sure, Izuku answered honestly. I haven't seen him fight in a while, so I'm not sure of his current level. But I know without a doubt that it'd be a tough fight. Arriving at the trains, Izuku and Kaminari said their goodbyes. Good luck with that, cutie. See you at the dojo, called Kaminari with a grin. Izuku rubbed his neck with a flustered smile. Yeah, see you later. While think what he was going to do. What am I doing? Izuku asked himself as he stood outside an apartment complex that wasn't all that far from his own. He and Uraraka had texted back and forth over the last 3 days and agreed to meet up today to hang out. Surprisingly, he was better at texting her than talking as he could read over what he was about to say, so he didn't say anything embarrassing. Looking down at himself, he was wearing what he hoped would be an appropriate outfit. Dark blue pants, a white shirt under a black zip-up hoodie that had green accents and had the word hoodie written on the back in green. He also wore a custom-made watch. It was made with silver, titanium, gold, and small diamonds. Honestly, if someone saw it, they'd likely try and rob him, but he was bored last night and wanted to see if he could create something intricate from scratch. Took him about 40 minutes before it started working properly. If he priced it out, it could likely go for over 100,000 yen. Maybe he shouldn't wear it, might give off the wrong impression. Before he could take it off, he noticed Uraraka coming out of the entrance. Yeah, Kaminari, she's a cutie, thought Izuku as he took her in. She was wearing black tights with fluffy boots and had a large brown jacket with a pink scarf. She smiled up at him as she got close. Nice to see you, Midoriya. You too, smiled Izuku, already relaxing. I thought I'd show you around the area, maybe a few good food spots. Anything or anywhere you want to do or see? Uraraka pressed a finger to her cheek and thought. Machi. Machi? Uraraka nodded rapidly. Machi. Izuku laughed and led her away. Very well. He took her to his favorite bookstore first, which was a bust. Most of the time there Izuku spent showing her the many lanes of books that held the knowledge that Izuku cherished. This was the place he spent years studying for his enhancements, the place he made quite a few friends as he read in the corner. But looking at Uraraka, he noticed that all the books made her eyes cloud and head spin. Seeing that he was losing her with his rambling, he quickly decided to leave to go to the place next door. It was a coffee shop and it was a success. She seemed thrilled to go in when they arrived, smiling ear to ear as she took charge and led them inside as if she were the guide and he were new in town. They make so many types of coffee, she shouted in shock as she read the menu next to him. Izuku shook his head with a smile. I'd personally recommend the hot chocolate. Also, the muffins are pretty good, he added with a tilt of his head. Muffins? What about the mochi? She asked him with a look, as if accusing him of trying to lead her astray. Izuku raised his hands in defense. We can still get some, just a suggestion. Uraraka nodded. Yeah, that's fine. She chirped instantly, going back to her happy, excited attitude. The cashier called next and Uraraka skipped up to order her drink while Izuku stayed back, sweat pooling on the back of his head in exasperation. She can be intense when she wants to. He thought with a sigh of relief that she could go back to normal just as quick. Leaving with their drinks of choice, Izuku decided to show her somewhere else while giving her the scenic tour of the city. Muzidafu was a massive metropolitan city with many tall skyscrapers dusted with the snow of the season. There was both an underground and above-ground railway system with thousands riding either at any one time. The streets were packed with pedestrians and traffic as many were coming from or walking toward their jobs. Sprinkled through the crowd was the occasional hero. Some stood out like death arms who would pose for pictures, while the more obscure heroes went nearly unnoticed as they worked to keep their territory safe. In the center of the city were some of the more important locations, the police headquarters, and the Endeavor Hero Agency. UA was towards the edge of the city as it had several massive cityscapes for training and required kilometers of space for their activities. Izuku led them to Takoba Municipal Beach, a once hotspot of pollution and dumping, having been cleared by a group of heroes in the past 2 weeks under the orders of the Hero Commission and the Muzidafu City Public Safety Council. So, this place used to be a huge dump? Uraraka asked in shock while looking at the sprawling, beautiful beach. Izuku nodded. Yep, it was really bad. There were piles of trash 2 or 3 stories high as far as the eye can see. Some kids got hurt playing here a few months ago and the parents sued the city saying that they had years to clean it up but just ignored it. After that, a few heroes were hired by the city and Hero Commission to clean it up. It was an interesting week. Pros came and went, using it as an opportunity to use their strongest moves to destroy trash. I'm surprised that you didn't hear of it. It was live streamed the whole time since so many pros were coming and going. I know that Endeavor came up to use his Prominence Fire attack and even All Might came down to Detroit smash some of it. Continued Izuku while looking over the beach. Uraraka tilted her head. I guess it is strange that I didn't hear about it. Maybe I was training or something? Well, now that you'll be living here, when it's warm you'll have a beach close by, Izuku said with a smile. Now I think you've waited long enough, let's get some mochi. Uraraka practically teleported over to him as he walked to a line of shops close to the beach. A year ago, these shops were on the decline as few people wanted to come to the area thanks to the trash heap that was Takoba. Now they were thriving businesses with several more on the way. On the right was a surf shop with bathing suits, surfboards, and other beach-going items. Next to that was a small ice cream shop that had a line out of the door even now in the cold weather. Finally, there was the cafe that had the mochi that Uraraka coveted. Uraraka was already done ordering by the time he decided on what he wanted. I'll take half dozen donuts, variety please, Izuku said to the cashier, who gave him a pleasant greeting and went to fulfill the order. Uraraka came up next to him with a curious look. You're not getting mochi? Izuku chuckled lightly to himself. I don't know why, but I was suddenly in the mood for donuts. After getting their food they left to walk and eat. Izuku was honestly running out of places he could take her. He wasn't much of a socialite that had dozens of spots to visit. I have only one more place that I go to regularly. It's the dojo that I train at, but we can end it here if you don't want to go. Izuku proposed. He didn't want to bring her to a place that she wouldn't want to be at. Uraraka shook her head. I think I'm okay, I don't really need a dojo. But thanks for the offer. I may take you up on it another time though. No problem, it's a good idea for a hero to know how to fight. Even if you plan to be a rescue hero, advised Izuku while reaching for another of his donuts. Uraraka nodded rapidly. Yeah, I agree, but I want to get into UA before I start training like that. Also, I'm on a pretty strict budget at the moment. Yeah, I can understand that. Izuku nodded. He and his mom were comfortable, but they didn't live outside of their means. Really? Uraraka asked with a raised eyebrow. 'Cause I've been meaning to ask about that watch, she said while pointing to his wrist. Izuku's face brightened as he stammered embarrassedly. That's not what you think. I made it with my Quirk last night. Great, the exact thing he was worried she noticed was being brought up. Uraraka giggled at his flustered state. It's alright, Midoriya. I know it's a replica, I was just kidding. She waved off. Izuku sighed but didn't correct her. Honestly, it was such a gaudy, over-the-top watch that most would think the same thing. He would keep it in his room for the time being, unless he had some crazy social event to go to in the future. With a couple subtle jabs and constant laughs, Izuku escorted her back to her apartment after a nice few hours together. "I had a great time, Uraraka," Izuku said as they stood outside of her apartment complex. "I'd like to spend another day together before UA if you want." Uraraka looked flustered for a moment before nodding rapidly. "I'd like that. We can go to that arcade you told me about or that massive mall on the other side of Muzurifu." "For sure, I'm not big on malls, but I'd like to go with you," Izuku said with a smile. "Well, I'm going to head in. I had fun," she shouted as she ran off with hands on her cheeks and a flustered blush on her face. Izuku tilted his head as he replayed what he said in his head. "Oh my god, what the hell am I doing?" he shouted at himself in shock. Izuku laid on his bed with a tired sigh. It was a long day of sparring at the fight dojo, and he spent most of it getting his butt kicked by Ryujin personally. His combat ability was rising at a steady pace. Physically he was a solid fighter, and with his strength he could take on a wide variety of individuals, but his true potential would be with his quirk. Now that was the dangerous part. Like a mechanic tearing apart a machine that was junk, it was far easier to destroy than to create. Izuku's quirk adhered to that more than most, as his quirk could destroy with laughable ease. Like tearing brain tissue apart, severing the spinal cords, or destroying organs so they didn't work. All of these things would take seconds rather than the hours it would take to fix them. So, with that in mind, he had several uses of his quirk in mind to give him some offense. He would practice them so that he wasn't forced to come up with something on the spot and risk killing someone on accident. First was utilizing water in all three states: mist, liquid, and ice. He couldn't manipulate ice to create giant icebergs or spires of ice, as he was still limited by his 5 kilograms limit. But he could create water to cover his target and freeze them in place. The good thing about this was that it would be an immobilizer, so the effects wouldn't be too dangerous. His second way was something he was practicing in his spare time for the past few weeks. It was compacting pure air to create a sort of air cannon. By compacting air into a tight ball in his hand and releasing it in a single blast gave enough force to blow away one of those 3-pointers with ease, at least if his math was right. The third way was much simpler. His minor telekinesis could be used to grab and pull someone's clothes like a shirt or pants or shoes. It could off-balance someone or keep them in place. It wouldn't do to ignore such a basic facet of his quirk. That being said, he didn't really need to practice this, as his control was nigh perfect, so he just needed to do it. The sounds of shock and rapid steps took him out of his thoughts right before his mother burst through his door holding an envelope. "Izuku, it's here! It's from UA!" she said in surprise as she handed it over to him. "Do you want me to leave?" Izuku reluctantly nodded his head. "I want to watch it alone. I'll tell you what it says." His mother's exuberance died down a bit, but she still gave him a smile before leaving the room quietly. He felt kind of bad about it, but he wanted to do this alone. Opening the envelope, a small hollow chip fell out and turned on. Instead of a faculty member that he recognized, it was All Might in a gaudy yellow pinstripe suit with his gleaming smile facing forward. "Hello, young Midoriya, long time no see." Dash. Well, it was only about 2 weeks since they've seen each other, but Izuku smiled at the sentiment. "I know you're wondering how you did, so let's get into it. You aced the written test, narrowly missing the top spot to a young woman in the recommended exam." Dash. That was surprising. He didn't want to toot his own horn, but he was a genius. It wasn't in a mommy's special little boy's a genius way, but in a legitimate tested and certified genius way, and he was sure he was going to be the top scorer. Regardless, he would be interested in meeting the one who beat him. "That being said, let's get on to the practical. You were putting on quite a show, my boy. You earned a solid 60 villain points, which is a top 5 score for the practical." Dash. Izuku grinned hearing that. He knew he had enough points to pass, but it was good to hear that he was in the top 5. Unlike in the written, he wasn't as confident that he was going to be at the top when there were so many different variables that he wasn't going to be able to predict. But there's more. There was a special hidden factor in the test, known as rescue points. How could a school not reward students that go out of their way to help or save others? You young Midoriya saved young Uraraka from the massive 0-pointer. With that, the committee in charge of rescue points award you Midoriya Izuku 60 rescue points, for a grand total of 120 points. This puts you in first for the exam and the third highest scorer in UA's history behind Endeavor and I. Congratulations, young Midoriya, and welcome to your hero academia. Izuku fell back stunned at what he heard. He was the top scorer in this exam and third overall? That was way higher than he ever expected, and he was honestly shocked. What did this mean? Granted, he didn't earn all of his points from fighting villains. But it was still incredible, and it made his abilities, what he thought of them, far more credible. It proved his potential and it proved his strength. "Mom! I passed!" he shouted, and his door slammed open with his mother smiling tearfully. "You were listening, weren't you?" he asked with a chuckle. His mother rushed over to give him a back-breaking hug. "Of course I was! I'm so proud of you! I always knew you'd be a hero!" Izuku hugged his mother back and just basked in the comfort of his greatest supporter. She really was the person who had his back from the very start, and was always the one who believed in him. "Thank you," he said into her shoulder. UA, the beacon of hero training for the country of Japan. Izuku stood in front of the school in his new uniform with a nervous smile on his face as he was about to enter the school for the first time as a student. He saw students nervously also entering for their first day, and the older ones laughing and talking with friends going on about their time off before the start of the new year. Izuku entered the school and made his way to his room, 1A, where he would be meeting his classmates and homeroom teacher. The door to the classroom was enormous, and it was clearly so because of the students with size quirks that this school must have taught in the past. Entering the room, he saw a few students in desks or mingling with each other. Because the universe hated him, he noticed Bakugo first, keeping to their decade-long streak of being in the same class. Then there was the tense boy from the exam with blue hair, who was in the midst of an argument with Bakugo. There was a boy with two-tone hair, half white and half red, with a curious scar over his left eye and an empty expression on his face as he stared into space. A boy with 6 arms that were connected by a skin webbing and was seemingly meditating, hard to tell with so much of his face covered by his mask. A girl with pink skin, a set of floating clothes, and a girl with violet hair were talking with each other, and a spiky red head was listening in and would occasionally speak up. In the back he noticed a stunningly beautiful girl sitting patiently. She had a spiky black ponytail, and no discernible feature that would give her quirk away. Next to her was a smaller boy with purple balls for hair who unashamedly stared at all the girls in the room. No Kaminari or Uraraka yet, but the argument between Bakugo and Serious Boy was getting heated, so he should step in. "So you're some stuck-up dash," shouted Bakugo with his right hand in his trademarked "I'm about to blow something up" clawed open palm. Izuku shot forward between them before either could continue. "Guys, maybe we should wait till the second day before we fight?" Bakugo glared, but Serious Boy spoke first. "I am not fighting with this brute, I am merely telling him to respect the desk that he has so rudely placed his feet on." Oh, this guy and Bakugo were not going to get along. "Bakugo, just take your feet off the desk, it's the first day and you're already disrespecting this place." He turned to Serious Guy. "Lighten up, I get we're all nervous, but this isn't really worth fighting about." Izuku sighed and relaxed. "Honestly, just get in your seats, I doubt it'll look good if we're arguing when the teacher shows up." Serious Boy bowed. "I apologize, and you are correct." His arm chopped forward. "My name is Tenya Ida, I look forward to working with you. I believe you're the one who took down that 0-pointer. "Yeah." Izuku nodded. "I'm Midoriya Izuku, and that was just an in-the-moment reaction. But it worked out anyway." "Don't think I have to listen to you, Deku," Bakugo growled, turning his anger from Tenya towards him. "I get it, but just calm down, we haven't even started our first day." Izuku tried to placate him, but he didn't expect it to really work. The classroom door opened again and Kaminari stepped in with a grin. "Midoriya! You beat me here, man!" Izuku grinned. "Of course I did, I bet you slept in and were nearly late." Kaminari rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "I wasn't that bad, but I could have been late if my mom didn't drive me up here. Anyway, you excited?" "I sure am." "Midoriya!" Another voice shouted from the door. Uraraka skipped up to him with an excited face. "You ready for today? I bet it's going to be a lot of fun." Izuku was about to speak when yet another voice piped up. "I hope you all don't think this is a school for socializing." The voice was quite deadpan, and it came from the floor. Most of the students exclaimed in surprise when they noticed a tired-looking man lying on the ground in a yellow sleeping bag. His eyes had backs, and his hair was sticking out of the sides of the face hole messily. He unzipped the bag and walked to the front of the room. The students that weren't in their seats quickly went to sit down. "Good, you all quieted down and took your seats. Slower than I'd like, but good enough for the first day," he stated simply with a side sigh. "My name is Aizawa Shota, I will be your homeroom teacher for as long as you study at UA. Izuku mentally groaned. This was the guy Gran Torino and All Might were arguing about when he first came to UA. The guy who expelled his entire class. Now he was going to have to be in his class. Now I want everyone to put these on. He lifted a blue and white gym uniform. We're going to the training field, hurry up, he said before leaving the room. Everyone scrambled to follow him and get their suits before rushing to the locker rooms that were thankfully close to the training field. Izuku was one of the first out there and waited for everyone else to show up. Aizawa was looking away from him silently as he waited. Slowly the rest of the class trickled out onto the field with low mutterings between each other. Now, today we're going with a quirk assessment test. In middle schools you have physical tests, but they don't let you use your quirks. That is illogical, and today we will see where your limits really are. He stopped talking when he noticed several students had questions. The first one to speak up was Uraraka. What about orientation? Isn't that mandatory? Aizawa sighed. I don't have time for things like that. In UA, teachers have control over their methods and hero training is far more important than speeches. Midoriya! He shouted, getting a curious look from the boy in question. Come forward. Izuku walked forward and took a ball from Aizawa. Stand in that circle and throw that as far as you can, no rules except that you can't leave the circle, Aizawa instructed. Izuku looked at the ball. It was like a standard baseball with a bit of metal in the center, and he could feel components for some kind of sensor, likely to transmit how far it flies. Izuku tried to think of a method to throw this with his quirk. Obviously, he had his strength, but there was no use in hiding what he was capable of, so he wanted to think of all the possibilities. Air cannon was first. Looking over at all the students that were staring at him expectantly, he got another idea. Manipulating his sweat into the chemicals needed for an explosion like Bakugo, then he changed them a bit to make the blast delayed. He hardened the skin of his palm and flexed, and prepared himself to throw as hard as possible. Taking a stance, he grunted as he forced a lot of his strength to hold back the compressed air and putting the chemicals onto the ball. All these events took place in seconds. Going through the motion of throwing the ball right at the apex of the throw, he released the ball. His impressive strength combined with the air let out a minor shockwave that kicked up some dust. Half a second after the ball blasted into the air and was already an impressive distance away, the sound of an explosion went off, propelling the ball even further. Izuku stood back up straight and went back to his class. The ones he'd never met before were giving him impressed and measuring looks for his display, while the one who knew him were looking at him in confusion. Kaminari particularly was looking at him with confusion so intense it looked like he bit into a lemon. Bakugo meanwhile was shaking with barely withheld fury, for whatever reason. You copied my quirk again, you bastard! Roared Bakugo as he shot forward, only to be caught by a scarf courtesy of Aizawa, who looked like he was just forced to do something against his will. Some of the other students were muttering to themselves at Bakugo's claim. Don't act out like this again, Bakugo, or you'll be looking for a different hero academy, Aizawa threatened with glowing red eyes and a frown. Bakugo grunted but stopped struggling, never letting the glare at Izuku up. Izuku, who wasn't fazed by Bakugo anymore, just shrugged it off and went to stand over by Kaminari. What the hell was that? I thought you had super strength, Kaminari exclaimed in shock. Izuku rubbed his neck. I never said that, I always said that I was strong. Then what is your quirk? He asked quickly. Well, Izuku started to speak when he noticed that several others were listening in. Great, he didn't mind telling people anymore, but he wasn't excited to just shout it out. Oh well. I can manipulate matter of anything that weighs 5 kilograms or less. I compacted pure air in my palm, then made a chemical compound similar to Bakugo's quirk to propel the ball alongside my strength. Some of the others around him looked at him in surprise or confusion as they didn't quite understand his quirk, while the stunning girl with black hair he noticed earlier came up to him. Unfortunately, before she could say anything, a device in Aizawa's hand beeped. Today is about knowing your limits, be it with your quirk or creativity. He looked at the device before turning it around to show the results to the class. The device read 1,410 meters. Wow! The pink girl exclaimed. That's awesome! Kaminari joined in. Yeah, I can't wait to try this out. Looks like fun! Shouted another voice that Izuku couldn't figure who it came from until he noticed rapidly moving floating clothes. Aizawa's eyes glowed red as he glared at the class, shutting them all up. It was then that Izuku realized who he was. Eraserhead, his quirk allowed his to cancel quirks with a look. Fun, huh? Grunted Aizawa. Well then, how about this? The person who comes in last will find themselves dropped from the hero course. This is UA, be ready to go plus ultra. With their excitement killed and some actually sweating, Izuku felt himself dislike this guy a bit more than when he met him. Who actively tries to make their students uncomfortable and stressed, especially on the first day. It wasn't like Izuku didn't understand, this was a tactic to make everyone give it their all. But it was a bit too soon, like let everyone learn each other's names before threatening expulsion. As Bakugo raced up to throne next, the girl with black hair spoke up. So you are able to manipulate matter, as in changing things on a molecular or atomic level? Izuku looked over at her with a surprised expression. I can, but I can also manipulate any atom to do anything as long as I know exactly what I want to do. For an example, he raised a figure and made a ball of pure iron the size of a marble spin into existence. You must have to manipulate the protons, electrons and neutrons of each atom in order to create as there wouldn't be iron particulates floating around, she said in awe before her expression grew serene. So that's what that feels like. Izuku tilted his head. What feels like? She smiled at him, making his stomach do a flip. Feeling pity for someone with such a complex quirk. People usually feel that about mine. You're the first person I've met with a more difficult-to-use quirk. Izuku didn't even pay attention to Bakugo's shout and explosion as he launched the ball in the background, or some of the other students grumbling at the loud blast. What do you mean? What's your quirk? He asked while leaning in. My quirk allows me to convert my lipids to create any non-organic object as long as I know its atomic structure. For an example, she made a Russian nesting dolls pop out of her hand. Izuku stared at the doll stunned. She made that in an instant, not even needing real focus. Also, hers was a quirk that was a step down from his and would, in exchange for the rule of non-organic creation, would construct what she wanted without the tiring focus his required. Wow, Izuku said, stunned. That's just not fair at all. He whined pathetically, getting an amused giggle from the girl. How long does it take you to learn to make something? He asked intensely. She thought for a moment. Depends, but I learned to make night vision goggles in a day or two. Izuku fell to his knees. You've got to be kidding me. It took months to make iron that fast. He cried, getting weird looks from the class. The girl laughed awkwardly. There, she said, patting him on the head. When he felt he pat his head, he realized where he was and shot to his feet in an instant. Sorry about that, he said with a cough. I was just lamenting my months of training. Your quirk is quite simply amazing, and I am completely jealous, Izuku said with a serious look as he stared into her eyes. Aizawa called the girl for her turn. Yaoyorozu, your turn! Izuku watched in complete fascination and jealously as she popped a cannon out of her shirt and fired the ball 4 kilometers away. That was how all the tests went. Izuku gripped the handle of the grip test with all his might, getting nearly 2 tons of force, only to be beaten by her making metal jaws that let her clear 2 tons. He beat her in the sprint, but lost badly in the distance run where he came in the bottom half. Pull-ups he lost due to being tired from the runs, toe touch he lost, and he was embarrassed at seeing how flexible she was. Long jump they both cleared the sand, side steps he lost, he was fast but didn't have spring shoes that let him bounce back and forth. Every time one did a test they complement the other on their creative use of their quirk. The test came to an end, and Aizawa in a rather unclimactic end didn't expel anyone, and Izuku felt it was more because he wasn't allowed to any more rather than the invisible girl or purple boy showing anything that impressive despite their low scores. Izuku followed Yaoyorozu off the field. You are incredible, I thought I was going to be the top scorer, he said, praising the one person to beat him. He managed second place while she had the gold medal. Izuku barely recognized the sulking Bakugo stomping off with a 4th place medal. Yaoyorozu blushed cherry red at his praise. It was nothing, I've been training for a long time, you did very well too, she tried to say, but he just kept staring at her. She continued, your quirk is actually incredible too. I mean, I don't see how matter manipulation makes you that strong. Izuku waved her off. I enhanced my body structure and made my muscles and bones stronger. You did? She shouted in shock. How is what I do better than that? That sounds simply amazing. Izuku threw his hand up as if it was a wonder she didn't understand. It took me years to get to where I could do that. Months of practice to make metals at a speed that was viable. I doubt it will be soon, if ever, that I can make the things you can. It's just so awesome. But I have a limit, she exclaimed as if finding a loophole. If I make too much, I run out of lipids and can't make anything till I eat. I can also become anemic. See, yours is better. Izuku nodded, So all you have to do is eat a lot. Your downside is also a plus. I mean, you clearly store it right. Seeing Yaoyorozu turn cherry red, he reared back in shock at what he just said. It's okay, she shouted, embarrassed. Thank you, she said while looking away. Hey, can you make hybrid constructs or only things that exist, like can you make a hybrid metal? Asked Izuku, trying to change the subject. Yes, she said, her face calming. I just need to know the atomic makeup or make one that is stable, otherwise dust just comes out. What about Dash? That was how his day went, he and Yaoyorozu shooting questions back and forth as they tried to say who had the better quirk. She did, but he wouldn't bring it back up. Otherwise he'd unintentionally compliment her even more and say things by accident. Not that she wasn't beautiful in her body, no, not in his own head. They exchanged numbers and already she was sending him questions in text form as he walked out of UA. So, you really don't know what you're doing, huh? Kaminari asked as he came up next to him with a flat expression. That was the most awkward flirting I've ever seen today, and somehow it was mutual. I wasn't flirting, Izuku shouted. Kaminari nodded. Oh, of that I'm sure. No one normal would call what happened today flirting, but somehow you two nerds were completely unintentionally flirting with each other. Let me guess, she gave you her number? Izuku almost said no just to prove him wrong. She did, he muttered. Kaminari looked like he bit into a lemon. I don't get it, man. Uraraka is a cutie, and now that Hody Yaoyorozu. What is it with you and pretty girls and accidentally succeeding? I don't know, alright. My mouth is faster than my brain, I guess, he shouted in exasperation. Kaminari walked ahead toward their train. They were both going to the dojo today, so they'd ride together for once. Whatever, I have to rethink my entire playbook, he said with a sigh. Sorry, Izuku whispered while reading the stream of text from Yaoyorozu. And there you have it, time travelers. Part 1 of our epic journey into the realm of what if Deku had matter manipulation. Did your mind just explode with possibilities? Ours sure did. Huge shout out to Blanduzername for inspiring this wild ride. Don't forget to drop a like, comment your craziest theories down below, and share this video with your fellow heroes in training. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, stay curious, stay awesome, and keep on adventuring through the multiverse. Catch you in the next episode. Peace out.